Welcome everybody to the Rational Frontier. This is going to be a special one. I believe pretty much everyone from my audience knows Nikola, and this is special because we have heard from him on podcasts before. I think Fabian Liberty's podcast as well, and as well as the Remnant about the uh, era of regression, and he's probably going to make more contributions to the theory. However, this is about another project of his which intrigued me more than perhaps even the theoretical work, which is this is a fiction project, and this is a fiction project, based upon uh, you know the our kind of philosophy. It is based upon anarcho-capitalism. It is based upon objectivism, and it is based, and on top of that, Nicola is really good, a really voracious reader of science fiction, and from my conversations with him about this project, he's a really good writer. So I
I
do
hope
believe we're
so.
in for a treat. Oh, you are. You probably are, man. Like, and I do believe the entire audience is in for a treat today. So let's go. Uh,
Well, let's see. I guess I'll just start with some of my notes here. I'll just introduce my project. Well, I'll introduce myself first. I'm Nicola. You might better know me as 5 Crownik 007 or Superboy Boys, depending on if you like look at the Liquid Zulu live stream chat. And I've just been a friend of Zulu's for a while, and then I met Man through Zulu, kind of that way. And that's enough about me. This is my project. This is called New Astronauts. And what I call it, it's a hard science fiction multimedia project. And I'll explain what I mean by multimedia project on the next slide. But this project actually began as a tabletop role-playing game setting that I made in late 2018, just so I could run a game with some of my friends. And then over the years, I just kind of kept adding things to it. Like I wrote short stories, and I tried a couple times to like start a novel, and I also did like illustrations, and I picked up world building as a hobby because I was like, I think it's interesting to like try and start writing, you know. But until 2024, it was largely like a disconnected set of vague science fiction storylines and concepts which I thought were cool, but they didn't really have a connecting tissue. There was no connecting structure or like a meta narrative attached to it. It was mostly like I call it like kitchen sink world building, where I just like I see something in a book or in a movie that I think is cool, so I try to like make my own version of it, and I don't really think about what I'm trying to say about it, right? And so that's kind of for a while the project kind of had this. I don't want to say it was bad, but it didn't have a direction, right? It was kind of just a hobby that I did, right? But then around 2000, late 2020, late or 2024, I developed a clearer aesthetic philosophy, and that ended up motivating me. And also, I developed a clearer view of what I wanted out of a science fiction storyline, right? Out of a science fiction science fiction, what I wanted out of science fiction, which I'll also talk about in a minute. And that made me take the project more seriously because I realized that there was a lack of good science fiction of the type that I wanted to see. It was rare, and because it's rare, I have to be the one to make it now because if there's not enough, then I have to satisfy my own demand. um, and Eventually, after some more development, I came to concretize the purpose of this project with a set of artistic goals and principles, which I called the mission, which I'll also talk about more later. I have lots of slides. I only have 20 slides. But yeah, so let's see if I can advance to the. Here we go. So why is it called a multimedia project? Well, really, it's not just one single novel or one illustration or one like book or game or comic. It's a whole world. It's a whole universe which I want to tell a bunch of different stories in. I guess another word you could say is like it's called like it's like a franchise, like the Star Wars franchise. There's going to be a new astronauts franchise, but it sounds kind of like pompous to call it that at this stage. um,
I don't think so.
so
I think it's a. I think I can see it happen. You know.
Oh yeah, yeah. But I I need to have at least two like proper artworks out in the world before I can call it a franchise.
Fair enough.
Uh, and so I have lots of different. And why is it a multimedia project? Why is it not just like a novel series? Well, it's because I have lots of different media which I want to create with it, right? So I have like illustrations here, comics, literature, animation, so all of these different types of media, and maybe I don't know, I'll whatever strikes me as interesting. I might make a video game, I might make a movie, like a live action, if that's in the cards, right? But like these are the media that I have like personally produced content for the project with, right? And now here's where we actually get into the meat of the presentation. So I'm going to talk about the problem with modern science fiction, but also the problem with modern fiction, which I think should be familiar to anyone who is interested in the objectivist aesthetics. But in general, I mean, just take a look at some of this promotional material. So I actually want to clarify. I like basically all of these like movies and shows that are on the screen here, right? So like The Expanse, I love the television show. I love the books. I've read it. Ad Astra, it's a pretty good movie. I mean, I got a bit bored of it. That Elysium, I really like the visual effects that Neil Blomkamp does. Like he's a great director. Utopia is a really good drama television show. Planetus, excellent animated show. But there is a problem that is common to all of these shows and a lot of modern science fiction. I don't want to say all because there's exceptions, but obviously this is like a we're talking about something that's epidemic, but not like universal. And the point is, right, like in all of these promotional material, like let's see The Expanse. The stars are better off without us. That's clearly a hatred of mankind, right? Like hatred of humanity. It's like it's not just grim, but it's anti-aspirational. It's not like the world. It's not like the setting is. It's not like the movie or the TV show is showing us a world that is. It's full of challenges that you can overcome. It's saying that it's not even worth trying to overcome the challenges. It's just a better. It's just better off that you weren't there, right? Another thing is that these movies and shows commonly tear down heroism, like as a concept. So typically, you'll have like a heroic character, and the heroic character is incapable of overcoming circumstances, right? So for instance, I'm not going to spoil Ad Astra too much, but Brad Pitt's character, he's set up as this like heroic, stern, stoic type of individual, and over the course of the movie, he's kind of broken down. And likewise in The Expanse, you see the idea of like being heroic is unrealistic, and it's idealistic and it's foolish. And if you want to be realistic and you want to be in the world, you have to give up your like moralism and you have to settle into like some kind of pragmatic worldview, or you just kind of give up, right? Um, and obviously in Elysium, it's a very simple movie. Rich people are evil and poor people are good. In that movie, it's very simple. And it's if we're gonna be charitable, it's at least it's simplistic, you know. Um, and likewise, so this is a common problem to all, uh, like not all science, but like it's common to science fiction and fiction in general. And I want to like the particularly pernicious element in the science fiction is that it's often anti-aspirational. And I want to touch on that point. So, in the past, science fiction has often been aspirational. It's been showing us this vision of the future which we could aspire to, something that we could actually think that's something we could do as a human species, right? And meanwhile, common science fiction these days is anti-aspirational. And it's not anti-aspirational in the sense that this is not something we could achieve. It's we would not want to achieve this. This is a bad thing to achieve, right? Like the expanse, the world in the expanse. Um, well, I mean, it's in the promotional material. You shouldn't do this, right? But also, like, obviously, there's a colonized solar system, but Earth is like this UN super state that has like universal basic welfare, and it's miserable.
Hmm.
Living in the asteroid belt is also miserable because you're basically like a slave, a colonial slave to either Earth or Mars or whoever, whatever local gangsters in power. And then Mars is like this turbo, not authoritarian, although it is authoritarian, but it's like this militaristic, super jingoistic society, very collectivist. So like, there's nowhere good in the Expanse at the very beginning, and it doesn't really change towards the end. No matter how much the political situation changes, it's always this kind of power game, and it's really just unpleasant to think about being there, right? And
And
so,
doesn't it make sense from, let's say, I believe the author is not someone who is like very well read into our sorts of philosophy, at least, but it makes sense from a very normie perspective. Okay, what should we do? Like when, you know, you're going to see this in your social science textbooks whenever you're in any sort of schooling these days, at least mainstream schooling. You're going to have, okay, what's the two alternatives that we have? Well, one alternative is, everybody is a democratic socialist and we all move towards, mega European Union Earth,
Mhm.
and the other alternative is, you're just some fucking dictator in the middle of like Africa or something, and like
Turbo
that
warlord,
exactly like
Giga
that,
Chad warlord.
yeah. And to be fair to those people, if you don't think too much and you just look at the world as it is and don't think what could be or ought to be and so forth, like, you don't consider other possibilities. That's the world right now, right? Like
Yeah, so
either
the
we
the
partner up.
expanse the
Yeah,
expanse is very much like a reflection of our time
yeah.
in science fiction. And that's kind of
Mhm,
why it's very limited as science fiction. I really like it. The character
mhm,
writing is great. It's very interesting from a hard science fiction perspective. It kind of revived the genre
mhm.
for a lot of people.
Yeah,
But it lacks the forward-looking element of aspiration
yeah.
that past science fiction had.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Like the modern dichotomy as internationalism and democracy and nationalism and non-democracy. And when people say non-democracy, they usually mean some sort of a dictatorship. So
indeed. Yeah.
that's the two, and you can see it came around like it resembles the American Soviet split, but
Mhm.
taking a more, European social democrat spin to it nowadays. So
Indeed. And I mean, like, you can see this, it's kind of colored by post-Soviet things as well, in terms of
yeah.
you have in the expanse, you kind of end up with this multipolar world eventually, where there's like multiple poles of power, and you have like these like metropoles, and then you have these smaller kind of statelets or like these little, African little countries that are like little pawns or whatever. And it's kind of reflecting what the authors see in the world rather
Mhm.
than what the world could be. And
Yeah.
I should have put another slide after this, which was like exceptions to the rule. So it would be like Project Hail Mary, The Martian, usually, and basically everything Andy Weir wrote, and also there are a few other like modern exceptions that aren't coming to my mind right now because I don't know. I should have thought of it earlier, but
Correct, correct.
and I
Mhm.
think the reason I should have included that, but I'll say basically this is my motivation for not uniquely. This is not the only motivation, but like I want to contrast to this. I want my project to not look like these. I want my project to be like it should be heroic. It should be aspirational. It should love mankind. Good is realistic. Evil is real, but it's bad, obviously. Um, and wealth is good, like some basic objectivist virtues in there just to be, just to
Mhm.
be right, just to be correct. Um, and to that end, I have a number of like aesthetic goals and principles that I came to. Um, so basically, I have a number of thoughts of like subjects and the manner of depiction. So like authenticity, reality, these are manner of depiction questions. So what it means for something to be authentic, it basically means to depict something honestly and holistically. And it's the opposite of what a caricature is or what propaganda is. So propaganda, it typically as it's an omission of facts, such that it paints a certain picture, right? And authenticity, you depict the whole case, right? So authenticity is important because, for instance, if I'm going to be depicting the socialists, right, it doesn't help me if I depict a caricature of the socialists.
Yeah.
I need to depict the socialists as they truly are, and that does mean that I have to depict a socialist character who has what we might consider virtues, right? Because it's important to note that it's important to relate that they are human beings, right? It's important to relate that fact. It's a holistic analysis of the situation. They are not some other type of creature to us. They have common features and even common desires to us quite often, right?
Mhm.
That's not to say that there are not like Ayn Rand villains in the world. I've met some, right? But I mean,
There's
even like
a
people
small
say
amount
that
in
about Ayn
there.
Rand, but Ayn Rand knew that not everyone is an Ayn Rand villain, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and so the other part is reality. So reality is like it's just realism. It's hard science fiction. So the point is, I'm grounding the project in our real world
Mhm.
because, well, first, authentic experience originates from the real world, right? But
Mhm.
also, New Astronauts is commenting on the world we could have, right? So it's important to me that it it emerges from facts about our world, right? I don't, it's not a fantasy, right? I kind of have a beef with fantasy, although I don't want to say fantasy is bad, like fantasy as a genre, but I'm a science fiction kind of guy. What can I say, right? And
Mhm.
so like that's an important thing. The heroic meta narrative is basically just that heroism is possible and it's available to everyone. Everyone can be a hero in their own life.
Mhm.
Um, it's a manner of being. It's a manner of choice, and it's also it's practical. It's not just like it's not something that's far away. It's not something that's it might be difficult depending on the circumstances. It might be difficult to be a hero to be an exceptional hero, obviously, but general heroism, generally orienting yourself towards truth, virtue, beauty, like all of those things is available and it's 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 beneficial. It's good to do so. Aspiration, obviously, I'm trying to create a world that while there are problems in the world in nationals, there's wars, there's states, like there's like there are bad things, right, that happen in the world. It is a world that you could credibly say that you want to aspire to live in, right? To create, right? Because it's something that has a positive vision of the future in a general sense, right? And there's a term here, concrete utopia, which comes from a different project. It's a project by a socialist, but he has a very clear aesthetic vision, which he calls concrete utopia, which is taking your social dream, your vision of the future, and concretizing it. It's almost accidentally objectivist, right?
Mhm.
I don't think he would appreciate that characterization if he ever sees this podcast. I mean, he wouldn't crash out, but
Yeah.
it's not he doesn't like Ayn Rand.
Mhm.
um, and then I have some specific subjects for depiction. So like philosophy and history, it's important that they are depicted and not just depicted but like I want to demonstrate why I'm interested in philosophy and history to a layman who might not understand it. And the way I would do that is I would link when I see philosophy, obviously I'm thinking about the abstracts, but the abstract connects to concrete facts in my life that I encounter, right? So when I'm thinking about philosophy, it's not just like, oh, this is a high-minded thing. It's also connecting to, oh, this is how I apply this in my life, right? And likewise, in the narratives of the new astronauts, it's going to show like how that connects to it. And obviously, history, new astronauts has a history to it, and the reason, like, how I would demonstrate that it's interesting is just like how that affects people's lives and how it's relevant to people, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, anarcho-capitalist society in practice, I'm going to be that's what I want to depict. There is an anarcho-capitalist society, and it's putting it in practice. It means that making certain concrete decisions that we don't generally talk about from the theoretical side. And then also our science fictional future as a history, like a real kind of set of events that could happen, and evil as a real force. So I mean that as it's not something abstract. It's not something that is like
Mhm.
that every villain might have like a sympathetic motivation or something. That's not necessarily true, but you know, um, every like evil is something that is present and something that can be combated and it's not always it's not something that can be like justified but it is something that can be understood, right?
Mhm.
That's what I would say because there's this bad dichotomy in fiction where either you have a villain who just commits evil acts for the sake of being evil, right? Like Sauron or something, or like that might be a bad example, but like think Professor Evil. He wants to blow up the world because he wants to blow up the world, or because he wants to collect a really tiny ransom for no good reason. Like a
Mhm.
penny or blow up the world. Right?
Yeah.
Um, Meanwhile, the other alternative is that the villain was actually right all along, or they have some sympathetic motivation, they have some real point, right? And this is kind of a false alternative I see, because there should be a villain who has a realistically understandable motivation, who is still not someone that you would like redeem, who would sympathize with, right? This is kind of the what I talk about with the socialist and the holistic depiction of them, right? The socialist has what you could naively consider to be humanistic motivations, right? Like in their own mind, they're imagining we're going to build this utopian society. We're doing this for a good reason, right? But you can see that they're still evil in a way, right? They're still committing these evil acts. They're still justifying bad things, right? And they are wrong. The thing is that they are wrong about their beliefs, and so that's an important thing to depict, I think.
Yeah. And like this is something that I see only in the socialists, especially in the Marxists, right? Uh, like the real socialists. If you have seen the recent Zulu stream, which was like, uh, four capitalists and three socialists, and they're like kind of debating, you
I
know?
think I was on that stream briefly. I actually
Oh,
joined
yeah.
for a little while.
Oh, I haven't fully completed, but
I haven't fully completed either. I joined like halfway through, and
amazing.
then like I left like three-quarters of the way through that stream where they covered the Jubilee video.
Yeah.
And I was there for a while, and you do notice like the socialists, they are not there because they explicitly want to cause human suffering. There are people like that in the world, and there are people like that I depict in New Astronauts, but there is a diversity in evil, right? There are evil acts that are committed in the name of humanism, right? In the name of in the misguided belief that it'll lead to some kind of better world. And not even like in a sympathetic way, but in a way that they they have this wrong belief, and it is almost it's a choice to believe that belief, like they are deliberate, they are evading, right? And I think you can see there's a character like this in the three body problem. There's actually multiple characters that are like this
Mhm.
in the first book, where it's set during there's sections set during the Cultural Revolution, and basically all of the characters who are political officers, or like these kinds of people who are facilitating you know political oppression, they
Yeah.
have this very human sense about their motivations. Not that their motivations are like sympathetic, but that you understand like there's a reasoning there that's more than just I want bad things to happen to people, you
Mhm.
know, right? Or I want suffering. I want to blow up the world, right? There's kind of like there's an objective that's in mind
Mhm.
beyond
Yeah.
just like, you know.
Yes, and exactly. And they do have like in that stream, like the capitalists, with the half exception of Karen Ann, like the capitalists really don't know what they're on. Like one guy there is simply a frequent Ben Shapiro watcher, like from the likes of him, and like the other guy is one guy just barely speaks, so I don't know what the hell he's about, you know. But when he spoke, he did make some good points. One guy is a populist, so the guy is telling you he's not a capitalist. Why are you inviting him over here? Like,
Oh.
so and the socialists are like one, there's the moderate social, the black guy, which is the moderate socialist. He's like
Mhm.
bringing up, like he's supposedly moderate because he doesn't want to kill all billionaires, but you know
Only some.
yeah, only some. And it's like he's bringing up points such as like they're united in their theory, like they're completely united in their theory, and they're bringing up deep theoretic points from their literature, right? Whereas
Mhm.
like quote unquote our side is just, I don't know, like a bunch of idiots in comparison, right? Like
Well, I
with
think
the,
it's one thing is like you've seen that graph where there's like less political diversity on the left than there is on the right.
I
That's
think that's
one
a
part
very
of it,
bad
right?
thing. Yeah,
That's one
like
part of it.
yeah,
And in a sense, having the more political diversity on the right, have I got that
yeah,
right? Is it's a sign of like an active political discourse, but also it's a sign of like not having a coherent, like unified vision for
indeed,
the future, right?
exactly. you
For the
know?
same reason as the diversity is our strength,
Not,
unity is the strength of the left,
yeah,
right? Not being diverse in their point of view, they have a unity of purpose to them, right? And that unity of
exactly.
purpose is partly born out of having that positive vision, right? That you can overthrow the contradictions of capitalism and institute some kind of more justified situation in the world, right? Whereas the right wingers, like, and I suffer from this as well because I don't like other right wingers to some extent, right?
Oh
Like if
no,
I
neither do I. Like
yeah, like
the only time when I think of myself as someone on the right is when I'm talking to a leftist.
exactly. That's the thing.
Like,
Like,
otherwise, I do not want to associate with these people.
yeah,
You
because
know?
for instance, I won't elaborate too much, but I went to meet like I went to a meetup group, a political meetup group for like um for right wingers, right? To speak
Mhm.
to some people 'cause I thought it might be interesting to speak to. But
Yeah,
they were more like the Sargon of Akkad, like post-liberal types. And so all of none of their concerns were very philosophically grounded because
yeah,
Sargon of Akkad, he's basically like a pragmatist, post-Marxist, post-liberal, right? Or like so he couches his opposition to leftism in Marxism. I think he literally says something like, I read Marx and I agreed with it, but then I was like, but what if all the things that Marx hated were based, right? So he just kind of flips it. It was like, what if the workers deserve to be oppressed? That's the joke I made, to Zulu. But
yeah,
like, I don't actually believe the workers deserve to be oppressed. I think the workers should adhere to the non-aggression principle and, live virtuous lives,
yeah,
right? That's what I believe. I don't believe they should be oppressed.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if and this is something I've thought of. First of all, I want to say something is that I don't think they were all idiots. Like on that panel, they did make good arguments here and there, and they probably smart people, but they were disunited, disintegrated, and not capable of handling a coherent theory. Right.
Indeed,
So like
yeah.
it's not an intelligence problem; it's a theory problem. Right.
Yeah, the thing is,
So
the right is kind of defined by its opposition to the left. That's
yes,
basically what it
yes,
is.
it's a negative and not a positive case. And
Indeed.
like Inductica made this point that the negative is far less important than the positive because only like the negative is not metaphysically primary, right?
Indeed, yeah.
Negatives don't exist. Nothing doesn't exist. Something exists, right? So like the positive is the primary, and something which is just built around the negative without a positive vision eventually loses. And this is somewhat observed in modern libertarian discourse, such as conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. Something that
Indeed.
Michael
And
Malice says, and this is why, because what conservatism is just the negation of whatever iteration of the left that currently exists. So all
indeed, yeah.
previous iteration of the left simply get absorbed into conservatism, making conservatism over time more leftist, you know?
Indeed. Yeah.
And
And I mean, just if you just like think about it from like a metaphorical perspective, you can't get somewhere unless you're driving somewhere, unless you're going somewhere, right? If you're just driving away from somewhere, like somewhere you don't want to be, you're not
yeah,
going to get anywhere. You're going to go nowhere, you
yes.
know.
And another good
You can
analogy that
clip
I can
that.
draw from, not even an analogy, another direct explanation that I can draw from is, and by the way, people should check out Jean Maroney's Thinking Lab. It's like her central theme is motivation. Like she works on motivation, right? And there are two ways in which you can motivate yourself. One is a motivation by values, which is that you define what values you want to gain in your life, and then you go towards them. And one is a motivation by threat, which is you identify threats in your life, that you want to be protected from, and you run away from them, you know. And it is a completely volitional act to which one you choose. And the moment you choose it, that defines your life. Because someone in the threat orientation, the threat landscape, so to speak,
Hmm.
they're always going to be running away from something. Always going to be running towards anything that is not that thing that they're running away from.
Yeah,
And
and it's
so,
a reactive mindset too, because
yes, mhm,
basically you give the threat the initiative by
yeah,
saying that you're defining your action by the threat.
yeah, and exactly. And those people usually they don't end up anywhere meaningful. They just, and this is what is the cause of most neuroticism, right? Like this is the cause of, oh, I need to be protected from this. I need to shield myself from this. I need to let the world, and eventually, if you continue to live in that mindset habitually, the world become what that develops into the malevolent universe premise that the world is
Mhm.
uh, evil and out to get me, and I'm incapable of handling it. You know,
Indeed.
versus if you start to habituate in yourself the value premise and see people can change, right? Like one can go from this to this and this to this.
I've
If
seen
you,
this in my own life,
yeah,
actually, because
mhm,
very much I used to be an anxious person and I used to be
yeah,
very like a little bit depressive, in high school.
mhm,
And it was studying philosophy which changed that. First I studied Stoicism, like I read Stoicism, and the thing is, before that I felt, I wasn't in control of my life, and I wasn't getting the things I wanted out of life, and it
yeah,
seemed that life was getting the better of me, right? I didn't have any way out, right?
mhm,
And then I studied Stoicism, and in Stoicism, you learn about the dichotomy of control.
yeah,
The things you control are your own actions, right? The outcomes of those actions are dependent on outside factors, which are not in your control.
mhm,
So by recognizing the sphere of your direct control, you can then optimize. You can say, well, what I'm going to take responsibility for is having the correct character traits, the things that are directly that are completely volitional to me, that cannot be taken from me by anyone else, right? Having the correct character, making the correct decisions, and then obviously the outcomes like are at least partially dependent on my actions.
yeah,
But if I build a factory and then it gets struck by lightning and it burns down, I can't say that I did anything wrong. That might be frustrating to my goals, but it doesn't reflect poorly on my character, and that's the important thing that I am trying to cultivate. That's one of my life values, right? So Stoicism gave me a positive vision, right? Stoicism was like, okay, you don't have to like run away. You don't have to be threatened by your exams, right? Because that's the kind, in high school, right? It's like I need to do good in my exams. I need to impress my parents. I need to make friends. I need to like all these things that are like I'm reacting to these pressures on my life, and it's a very negative mindset because it's like I am falling short, and because I'm falling short, I'm going to suffer somehow, right? Whereas if I am living by the value premise, I can, and the stoicism, like by setting the dichotomy of control, I can say, I am either I'm succeeding, which is great, but even if I'm failing at like my own setting, my own set values, by having like set it out myself, I can say, okay, there is a definite path for me to make the right choices to go from here to there, right?
mhm,
Right. So rather than it being just a matter of outside circumstances oppressing me, perhaps you could say, it's a
yeah,
matter of I I need to do something to change myself, and that's within my power. And in a sense, even if you're in like a bad situation, even if you're like, let's say you're an addict or something, and you have this idea that okay, I can actually get out of this by making the right choices. You're still empowered. You still have this sense of confidence about the world, right?
mhm.
So it's a worldview more than it is like a particular set of circumstances that determine your reaction to things.
Overall trajectory in life, yeah.
Indeed.
And and that's what like we need as a movement. We need uh if socialism is to be defeated, you need a positive case which is better than socialism, right?
Yeah.
And and this is at least admirable from a distance. Of course, this is a virtue of the socialists that they understand this, and it is a vice of the non-socialists that at least all of them don't. At least some of them do.
Yeah.
We have a small movement which is capable of it.
Well,
But
obviously Ayn
uh,
Rand understood. Ayn
yeah,
Rand understood the power of art. Like she was a novelist, right?
yeah,
She wrote the Romantic Manifesto, which
hmm,
I still haven't finished, but I need to get around to finishing. But
hmm,
like it was her art was her entry, not her entry, like it was her primary means of communicating philosophy, right? She
hmm,
wrote her novels and then she like thought about like doing nonfiction and stuff like that. She kind of went for progressing from fiction to nonfiction throughout her life, right?
yeah,
And um and she very clearly articulated like art is how you picture your philosophy being implemented, right? And if you don't
yeah,
have that, then you don't actually know what your future is going to look like. Like at the very fundamental level, art is it's taking the basic process of imagining your future, imagining something that could happen, imagining good things that could happen or bad things, right? If you're trying to warn about bad things, right? Um, and then making that into a something that's in the real world, some image or some real formation that can be reproduced and communicated, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the lowest level of what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so Ayn Rand understood like, well, if I'm trying to communicate my vision of the world, my vision of humans, my vision of people, I need to concretize it, right? And so that's what she did. And like, but the thing is, on the right, we have very few artists in general, and the ones who we do have, they aren't really
Good.
motivated by their philosophical vision. Well, they can be good. They can have technical talent, but generally they don't have like a concrete philosophical vision to present, or um, and so they're kind of artists without politics. Whereas the leftists are artists with politics. They have a politics and they put it in their art, right? But and there are right wingers who do put politics in their art um, on occasion. It sometimes get in, but it's
Yeah.
often disintegrated. It's disconnected. It's not really well formed, right?
Hmm.
Um, and in my case, um, I'm also trying to like set up that positive vision for the anarchist objectivist, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are the things in the world which we might want to aim for? What would we want to achieve, right? What are
Hmm.
things that are good, like that we can say that would be really cool that we could do? Like that's something we could aim to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm putting out here, right? Like I think, this would be really cool, If
Yeah.
we built anarcho-capitalism on the moon, I'd be over the moon.
You,
Um,
you'll go over to the
I'd
moon.
go over to the moon. I would. I really would.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. What do I got next on the
Yeah.
slideshow? Oh, I've got like a little. I've got the little timeline graphic I showed you the other day.
Hmm.
I did not add any more events to it. It's incomplete, but I can kind of give people the Cliff's notes on what the history, what the setting of New Astronauts is like. So, um, I'm gonna give the short version because I could yap for hours about this, but basically, there's basically three eras to this timeline. The first era, it starts like in the 90s, and there's a it's a slight alternate history where there's a greater global liberalization. There are some economic zones, and commercial spaceflight gets bigger, and it also ends up relating to there's a new kind of space race between the US, Russia, India, and China regarding the development of moon bases and moon facilities and orbital infrastructure. And there's a bit of a military component to it. There's a kind of like military competition in the new domain. And all of this kind of ends up putting more energy into the commercial spaceflight industry because each of these nations contracts out much of their like infrastructure to private businesses, right?
Hmm.
And obviously, the private businesses have their own interests in space as well. Um, and so you end up seeing like, there's Artemis 1, which is the NASA moon base, and they are hiring like SpaceX or Amazon, and they are providing support facilities. They are processing material on the moon to build new structures. They're doing a bunch of industry, right? And that situation ends when the global like liberalization kind of goes down again when the different states enter like more hard military competition, which leads to World War III, which kind of collapses the world order. But by this point, there are these special economic zones which come to be called space cities because they are very tied in with the space industry, and they have like the surface to orbit launch infrastructure, and they're able to kind of defend themselves politically from the warfare by like negotiating well and having actually some kind of like credible military force of their own to be able to kind of defend themselves from threat. And so after the war, there's enough of this infrastructure left so that a lot of, ambitious refugees who are not interested in any of the existing political orders after the war, because there's a kind of a huge collapse period. They're like, okay, I'm interested in political entrepreneurship. I want to start a new city, a new polity. I don't want to do any of these existing things. I want to seek my fortune somewhere where I won't be taken for granted. I won't be oppressed. And so these kinds of people go to the moon and they start their own polities. And that's where the first new astronauts come from. People who live and work in space and people who are seeking to like be, I don't know, citizens or people of space, right? They're not Earthlings who are visiting space. They are people who live in space. This is their home, right? And that's kind of the first era. That's also where we get what I call the space steaders, which is like seasteading but in space. And they go to the moon. They're like the libertarian faction of people who are doing a political community, intentional community on the moon. And likewise, there are a few different blocks. There's the Astro-Panslavists, which is Panslavism on the moon. There's the Fieldists, who are they're like the dissident right on the moon. They want to like revert to traditional forms of power structures, like lordship or like, but in a way that's meant to ensure investment and like reciprocal relations. And then there's the Lunarians who are the liberal socialists. They're like, we need technocracy, right, to fix our problems. And by the end of this situation, the Selenians end up winning out kind of this competition on the moon, and they end up incorporating these other communities in such a way that their descendant populations to intake the culture of the Selenians, right? The space that has become the Selenians. They have this like national genesis. They develop a culture beyond just their shared legal theory, and that culture spreads to these other populations who then become part of the Selenians. And the moon it becomes Ancapistan. Thank God, you know.
Yeah.
And then the second era, it comes on when there's this split in the Selenian movement, where basically the people who take on some of the Lunarian, not necessarily their philosophy, but their tendency for technocratic thinking, right? They're like, we need to solve this problem in an orderly and institutional manner, right? And maybe a little bit of their philosophy, right? Like in terms of, there needs to be some kind of ordering to the world to protect people, right? But they take on the Selenian natural law tradition, which is the Rothbardian tradition, right? And they say, okay, the national non-aggression principle is the root of law, but there's this notion of guardianship, and guardianship, you could imagine an institution that takes guardianship of the interests of the people in general, of the nation, of like the the polity, right? And that's what their conception of the state is, right? So they are the minarchist like heresy in nationalists, the Karandans, that's what they're called. They're the schism, and they decide they're going to go to the outer solar system. They're going to go to Saturn, the Saturn's moon Titan, and they're going to develop their minarchist like nation there by exploiting the hydrocarbon resources and like becoming very wealthy. And they succeed. They develop basically like uh, they first start like a very successful like colony, like a business. Then they evolve it to a republic, which then incorporates like nearby colonies and territories until eventually they have like this imperial apparatus over like 100 years. They kind of develop this sort of American style liberal hegemonic empire between Mars and Neptune, right? Meanwhile, in the same time, the Selenians have been consolidating their situation on the moon. They've been industrializing rapidly. They've been getting extremely wealthy and developing advanced like institutional structures and relationships with the Earth powers, which have kind of recovered by this point. They have their own like there's like these states and then these pockets of like Ancap in these space cities, like they are kind of these outposts of Ancapistan, and there's a complex political relationship there. And then there's also the relationship between Selene and Karanda, because there's a sense in which they are rivalrous, but neither side really wants to fight the other because they kind of view each other as like the misdirected brother, right? There's this
Mm.
kind of cultural view because like they're both like you shouldn't violate the non-aggression principle, right? And
Uh,
but the other
you know,
one the other one is like a minarchist and one of them is an anarchist, right?
yeah.
Um,
And this is very indicative of the relationship between the objectivist minarchists and our kind of people, right? Uh,
yeah,
in the sense that, and at least I view it like that, with the exception of certain crazies over there in their movement and certain crazies in our movement. At least the smart people, like take Michael Leibowitz, take someone like Inductica. I don't know if Inductica. Uh, from last I talked to him, he does like he still is a minarchist, but I have given him convincing arguments. So you know,
yeah. I mean. there's a sense of curiosity and respect, and
Oh
also but
yeah,
also like concern. Like it's like
yeah,
you should be thinking about the you should be thinking the right thing. This is what I'm going to give my
exactly.
argument.
So
But
there
they're
is
not gonna
certainly
like
this. Oh,
they're not
they're
gonna
the,
beat you with that.
you
Yeah,
know, they're the misdirected brothers.
yeah,
And like where the right, and fair enough, because if you share, let's say, the most fundamental branches of philosophy, and the disagreement is in politics, and let's be honest here, the disagreement ain't much. You know,
yeah.
you're gonna be they're gonna view each other as misdirected brothers at the end of the day, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And
Uh,
so in the sense of the Karanids and the Selenians, their competition is probably a bit more tense because they are, I mean, they're polities. Like the Karanids, like they both have, military forces. In the Karanids case, they have like a state army, and the Selenians have the defense insurance industry, which has like its own private armies. And so there's the sense, there's the tension of, oh, we both have military forces and we have opposed political goals in some cases. So are we going to go to war? And it's like, no, right? Like so, for instance to give some context, like Selenian businesses do business in like Karandan territories, right? So they
yeah.
have like a trading relationship like functional nations, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so, but there is this political competition between them because they have these opposed views of the correct application of natural law, right? They are like in a sense, it's kind of like a conflict between the UK and the US, right? They both have
Yeah.
these, both have a same English liberal, English common law tradition,
Mm.
and they had this opposing view of how it's applied.
Mhm.
Um, and
And it,
that competition kind of, changed over time. It kind of moved into an ally or like a satellite relationship as the power of
yeah,
each changed. The situation is different here because the Karandans, they developed like an American style empire, but they
yeah.
never actually have to fight like a war against the Selenians because the Selenians didn't colonize Karanda because the
Mhm.
Selenians don't have an empire, right? They don't have that kind of expansionist element to them, or at least not in the same way. They have like kind of cultural export element, but they don't.
Yeah.
They're never exporting like a military force to
Mhm.
occupy people because they're anarchists, so they can't. They
Yeah.
don't have standing armies. They don't have taxes, and any venture of that kind has to be somehow profitable, right? For it
Yeah.
to be
And private.
existing,
I
right?
do
Private.
believe private ventures could exist, right? Like in
Yeah,
the sense
indeed.
that, yeah, and they
Private
probably,
military adventures to like topple a warlord is something that
yeah,
could happen, but on the institutional level, there has to be like more reasoning than it's legal and it
yeah,
would be funny, right?
yeah,
It's like how would toppling this warlord benefit our like enterprise
yeah,
requirements? And also there is a sense in which like there's a public desire to finance the expansion of like Ancapistan, right? People want the rest of the world to end up that way. But there's also like, well, military action is insufficient because in order for Ancapistan to spread, you have to change the ideas of the population, right? The
exactly,
remnant theory, right? And so
exactly. And you know,
yeah.
I
It makes it
recently
yeah.
visited, I recently visited the, I recently visited Vietnam, and there, like, it's very clear, like, there's a lot that I can say about it. Much of their narrative of the Vietnam War is propagandistic in the sense that it's lying by omission. It's going to be, oh, uh, like the US did 500 horrible things and we didn't do anything, you know.
We
So
never tortured anyone. I
we never
promise.
do. Yeah, you know, and so that it's certainly problematic. But one thing that the point really is very clear on is that the amount of bombs, vehicles in the clear sheer infrastructure against rice farmers there was there. And, like the Vietnamese were using World War I era equipment to fight the
Yeah,
Americans.
so like if I remember, I've done a little bit of reading or like well, watching lectures about this. So like
Yeah,
the thing is, I didn't used to know there were three Vietnam Wars in the 20th century. Well, there's
yeah,
more.
they were.
The three, there's the first Indochina War where the French are trying to retain Indochina as a colonial possession. And then they're like, okay, this is too much work, so they fuck off. And then the United States is like, okay, no, we need to prevent communism, so we're going to support the South Vietnamese government against the North. And that doesn't work, so they fuck off. And then the whole time in both the two previous wars, the Chinese communists were supporting the Vietnamese against the Western power, right? They were giving them training and funding and arms. But the third time in 1979, China was like, okay, now it's our turn to invade Vietnam. And they had this the Sino-Vietnamese War. It's like, so you help them repel two invaders, and you're like, Now it's our turn to test out the skill of our student. And they failed to take over
Yeah.
Vietnam. So what does that tell you?
Don't invade Vietnam. Try to convince the Vietnamese.
Never invade Vietnam. Exactly, yeah. So
And
so
like
yeah.
uh, a small tangent there, but like in the south of Vietnam, like much of the city people were actually pro-capitalist, and the
Mhm.
communist insurgency, it was in the countryside, which
Indeed,
it
yeah.
didn't work out for them because the countryside is just as poor as it used to be. I think it
Mhm.
probably has improved, but not. If they remained capitalist, it would have improved far more.
Mhm.
But for all intents and purposes, it's not a good enough improvement for the time scale. But the city people, like which were capitalists, much of them moved to the US. So the US Vietnamese community is very right wing and very capitalistic. And
Mhm.
the remnants of it in the South, there is this. It's now no longer a political issue, but the southern capital was called Saigon before, and
And
they
now it's
changed
Ho
it
Chi
to,
Minh City.
yeah, it's Ho Chi Minh City now. And but you always, like, I always said Saigon when I was over there because just in case,
Your minor act of rebellion against the
yeah,
communist regime.
exactly, like just in case someone hears that and has some you know rebellion in their heart, and they're at least satisfied with that, that hey,
Uh,
potential ally, so like
yeah.
that was my little homage to the capitalists of Vietnam back in the day.
Actually, that does remind me. That kind of loops me back to a point. I kind of want to bring this up later, but it's about the Selenians, right?
Yeah.
And their kind of um, composition as a people.
Mhm.
Because, like as you mentioned, like a lot of the capitalist Vietnamese, they left Vietnam and they went to the US, and they're very red-pilled and based and capitalist, right?
Yeah.
So the Selenians, oh, well, like first let's talk about the space studies. So the space studies, they're not like from the US only. But they are all, like not all, but like the core group is like Rothbardians, right? Like
Yeah.
libertarians from across the globe. And obviously they're in international groups. They have varying different cultures, but they share the commitment to natural law. And the other thing is like, on the grounds that they share the commitment to natural law, they are all kind of outcasts in their own home societies, right? So even if they are carrying the culture with them, they are kind of alienated from the tradition, right? It's not like they're going to be like to be there and then they're going to carry over all of the same, I'm gonna use the word bigotries that their home
Yeah.
society had because they were a targeted minority. I'm kind of talking like a leftist here a little bit, but like if you understand my point, like
I do. I do.
if you're outcasted in your own society for your fringe political beliefs,
Mhm.
you're not going to carry on this. You're less likely to transmit those same like uh
Idiocies of the society
orthodoxies,
abroad. Yeah.
yeah, from your home culture. And that's part of what makes it easy for the space setters to undergo this kind of national genesis, to like actually kind of create not just be like a group of different countries who have like a group of different ethnic groups with different cultures who agree on one thing, but to actually
Yeah.
become one nation with like multiple ethnic groups who have like these different traditions, but they have these shared common values beyond just law, but also
Mhm.
like on topics of like virtue
Yeah.
and shared like social traditions,
Yeah.
shared linguistic norms, shared ideas of, right and wrong and what is good literature, and shared heroes, like shared, like things that are shared between them that are not even legal or like philosophical, but like just cultural products. Like there's a heritage that they share to each other, right? That's what makes them like
Silly.
into a
Yeah.
nation, yeah, right. And it's important because
Mhm.
the Selenians, there's a kind of tendency on the right, which is like even if you're not in the like post-liberal tradition, to think about like um, monoethnicism as an important element of like a nation, or like the idea that having the leftist idea of diversity being not like having a diverse nation is not possible in some way,
Yeah.
and um, the Selenians are kind of my answer to that, um, almost accidentally, because I kind of modeled the Selenians off of my time in Australia. I'm a Serb, but my family immigrated here to Australia. And Australia, like I live in Sydney, which is
Mhm.
I'm not doxing myself, but like there's like 5 million people here, and there's a lot of immigrants from different backgrounds. And obviously there's some strife between immigrant groups. But in general, I experience a life where most immigrants to Australia consider themselves Australian very rapidly. They kind of develop this attachment to the Australian culture
Yeah.
and to Australian identity. It to a lesser or greater
Makes
extent, depending on the
sense.
person.
You know,
Um,
it
and
really does make sense
yeah,
because, like, from what I have seen in immigrant trends throughout the world, like you look at the Irish, right? The Irish, and this is the difference between empire and immigration. Like there are more Irish in America than there are more Irish people in America than there are in Ireland. And the Irish people in America never wanted their own Irish nation. They became Irish Americans, right?
exactly. Yeah. And
The
part
British
of
could,
it is,
like the
yeah.
British occupied and were legitimate holders of Ireland, legitimate, of course, but they were kings of Ireland from time immemorial. And still the Irish are like, okay, we're going to fight you. There's this song in which there's this Irish rebel song, which there's lyrics, we've fought you for 800 years and we'll fight you for 800 more. And, so that's the difference between immigration and empire. And
Yeah.
from with minor differences such as, certain, recently there is a wave of uh, extremism in Islam. So certain Islamic immigrants might have more trouble blending in. But even then, like, let's be honest here, like, with very few pockets of people which are, you know, very problematic, a person from a random Islamic country is probably more likely to integrate than not. But of course,
Yeah.
like,
And I mean,
you know,
there's the case. I consider the case against like radical Islam to be a case against radical religion rather than a case
yes,
against
yes.
Islam.
And
Because
Islam is a particularly innovative religion at that because it had seen a lot of iterations of religion. It's the
I
newest
mean
religion,
it's
you know?
novel.
Yeah,
It's younger as far as religions go.
yeah.
And like it's like version 3 of Judaism,
Yeah.
right? Um that's
I have a Muslim friend and I often annoy him with this. You know,
I
I,
can't. I hope my Muslim friend isn't watching this podcast because he's gonna hear that and he's gonna DM me like you fucking asshole. But you know, and
I call
the other
him a
thing is like
second derivative Jew.
that's one thing. That's one thing that like kind of inoculates me against like the full writing off of Islam as like completely like irredeemable. Because like in Australia, there are lots of Muslims, right? I went to work. I worked as an electrician in construction trades, and like I think like half of the guys who did concrete and like brickwork
Mhm.
or like they're just like they're from Lebanon or they're Muslims or whatever, and like well they're just guys. They're literally just dudes, right?
Mm.
They don't have any problem with me or anything. Like
Yeah,
they have like certain religious commitments and they basically their relationship to Islam is almost the same as the relationship of a modern like liberal Christian's relationship to Christianity in that
yeah,
it's their religious commitment in a liberal society where they understand their religious commitment is not a political commitment, right?
yeah. Mhm.
And like I think that's part of the vision in the Selenian society. It's not like a because it's a multi like it's a society that's developing. I imagine that it secularizes over time, but there are different religious groups in the Selenian like melting pot, I might say, right? There's Muslims, there's Christians, there's Jews, there's the whole Judeo-Christian family, Abrahamic family, I guess I'd say, and minority religions and cultists. We're gonna have the Scientologists in there. We can't leave them out.
Yeah,
I'm not writing a story about that.
yeah,
But yeah, and like, but one thing is, I think over time, the as like the broader Selenian monoculture kind of develops and like um, shapes the constituent groups over generations. There's like a trend towards secularism, and that's like kind of one thing. This is another tangent. I'm gonna kill this tangent very like soon after I say, but like that's another problem with modern science fiction is that its depiction of secularism as basically like Reddit atheism, which is
yeah,
like you're so tiny in this broad universe, but it's okay as long as have fun or whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
no, we want like Aristotelian, Ayn Rand, like objectivist, like you are a hero in this universe. There are great things in store for you if you take your life into your own hands, kind of secularism. And like there is right and wrong in the world because you are a living creature that has requirements for your life, for the proper exercise of your life, right? That's the kind of secularism that kind of I'm trying to push forward, right? Anyway, I'm on slide 5 of 20. I'm gonna move on to the next
Yeah.
slide. Um, although this slide is pretty easy. This is just, I mean, we've kind of covered most of this. I'm just talking about Celine, the nation, right? So I've talked a bit about this um, already. So we've kind of already covered that a little
Yeah.
bit. And the next slide is also Coranda. I mean, I have, you can see the flags here. So the flag design here, I did this on a whim. So the one on the right here was the first one. It's just green and blue, right? Bicolor. And the reason I picked that, um, I just like the colors, but also I kind of retroactively decided like the Selenians are on the moon, and the moon is famously gray. It's got one color, right? And it's not a very pleasant color. But what the Selenians end up doing when they build their habitats and they build their like space stations and whatever, they build lots of green spaces, lots of parks, right? And I've kind of concretized, I've developed this vision further as I understood like Zulu's relationship to the environment and his talk about how parks they're an artificial environment.
Mhm.
So the Selenians take that to heart. They have a very kind of Promethean view of their relationship to I need a word that's not environment, but like green spaces, spaces that have the elements of nature on Earth but are under control. They are an engineered thing. They are completely artificial in this lean economy. They created them. They have like professions of engineers, ecological engineers, whose job it is to build parks, design them, right, from the ground up and like construct them. And that is an achievement on the part of their society because it's good for your psychological health to see the colors green and blue in your environment. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
And that is something that they did. They went to this airless, like completely hostile environment that is like that human beings would die instantaneously without technology, and they built the environment that is comfortable for humans. And then
Yeah.
obviously we have the gold and black stripes or chevron for Ancap, you know.
Mhm.
That's another standard. I might
Yeah.
make variants because I'm
I
other
want to
variants
ask
because
something about Celine. So,
no,
uh, it becomes a nation, right? It becomes a nation of unified identity.
indeed.
Is there a unified polity, or is it simply distributed?
So what I would say, um, I think I described the history of the moon earlier. There's basically the four big blocks. There's the Astropanslavists, the space setters, the Lunarians, and the Fieldists, right? And um, and obviously these groups also have their own constituent ethnic groups. So like there's like Lunarians, largely Chinese, Russian, and like East Asian, Southeast Asian, and European. That's kind of like their pot, right?
Yeah.
The space setters are often American or they're like American transplant ethnics. And there's obviously like, various groups from around the world where there were space cities. So like there's Indian groups there, there's Japanese, there's some East Africans, some like Argentinians, like like South Americans. Like there's a lot of I just throw everyone in there, honestly. Anyone who I want, I just put them in there, right? And obviously they all have their constituent ethnic groups and they bring in their traditions. And then they have these like four blocks even after the Selenian nation, right, like forms in the space that is, um, and then they come to integrate the other blocks. The blocks kind of retain not a separate identity, but they do retain certain like unique traditions to themselves. Traditions that are not like contradictory to the Selenian identity or the Selenian monoculture, but like it's the same way like, people from New York and people from pick a different city, Texas, have different traditions. They have a different identity, but they both have a common American identity. They have a common American monoculture to them, right? Um, and so that's the same way it ends up being on the moon. Now, as
Mhm.
a polity, there is a so because of their ANCAPs, there's no state. But what it means to be a Selenian in the very like narrowest sense, uh, for like a city, like a habitat, what it means is that it is under the rules of natural law, right? So the accepted law, the accepted court there is natural law, and also for it to be properly Selenian, it has to be in the vicinity of the moon, because
Hmm.
otherwise you're just an Ancap who's not
Yeah,
on the moon. You know,
yeah.
you're an ally, but you're not under what's called the Selenian Aegis, right? Aegis, right? That's kind of like the formal term for people who accept natural law and are on the moon, right? And then there's like the Selenian cultural spread, which is like it's strongest at the space that are like core habitats, because that's where the original culture kind of formed, and that's where it's most uniquely Selenian there, right? And then if you go to the Astro-Pan-Slavist territories, you'll end up seeing like there's obviously like a lot of Slavic tradition that survives there. There's like that's where you see Orthodox Christianity and like obviously the Croats have their weird Catholicism. Who knows what they're on about, right? And the inter-Slavic language is stronger there than it is anywhere else, right? But they also they accept. I wrote something down about this where basically everyone understands the same virtues, but they have different expressions for those same virtues, right? Um, they have different language, but they all talk about courage, right? As a valuable virtue, right? So that's it's the same sort of way, right? Like they have their different expressions for the same thing.
It's
Uh,
the frontier spirit.
exactly.
Yeah.
And uh, that's what it means in terms of. Do you have a specific question about like what it means to be a polity?
Yeah. So what I was imagining is that if we remember uh, ancient Iceland, there was a common parliament. And what made that place not an ANCAP was that there was no free entry into the common parliament,
Mm.
right? So, and I was imagining this that uh, even under natural law, and this is an argument I'm not too strong on. So, this is simply just brewing in my head. I need to write it down. So, even under natural law, there is a good argument for having a common polity, like a common, let's say, dispute resolution authority,
Yeah,
sort of
like a
speak.
representative structure that like is like we are a group of people. We're like let's say okay, I'll explain this for the Selenians, right? Because that's going to be useful. So,
Hmm?
in the earliest sort of like um parts of like the space that are and like lunar colonization, the general political structure that many habitats like cities ending up using is what's called an assembly, right? And basically, what happens is the colony is made up of different like properties, right? But if they're all tied together, then everyone who's a property owner has a seat at the assembly, and the assembly is everyone like it is basically a democratic, um, not necessarily democratic, but it's like a congress, right? Or like a
Yeah.
town hall, right? Or I drew it from the Acadian parish assemblies, right? It's
Yeah.
where like, everyone in town who owns property goes here and we discuss issues that are common to our interests, right? And then one level up. So let's say you and the next neighboring habitat have common interests, and like there's a third one who you also have common interests with. So
Mhm.
what you do is each assembly is like, okay, we have common interests with these people, and let's send a delegate to each of these assemblies, and we'll form an alliance. So we have a three habitat alliance or whatever, right?
That's what I
And
was thinking. Like that's
yeah,
what the emergent order of it
there's an
would look.
emergent order, right? It's bottom up. So what happens is this alliance, then there's other alliances nearby, and they are like, okay, let's form like a meta alliance, like our
Mhm.
alliance is an alliance now, right? And so it kind of goes up that way, and it's sort of like an upper limit. So like, usually you go like two alliances up, and then you just kind of enter like a global, security framework. So you end up kind of forming like natural, like counties, and then provinces, and then like NATO or something, right?
There's something,
And
really important to point out here is that, like, there's something we've noticed is that, you know, universal philosophies often end up with they often do end up with universal polities in the sense that what do the socialists want? They want the world they want the world common form, right? And
Exactly.
similarly to ANCAPs in the sense that we do sometimes play into nationalism because we want decentralization. But
Hmm.
like the ultimate goal would be like a global,
Cosmopolitan nationalism,
exactly, a
the nation of
cosmopolitan.
everyone.
Yeah, that for sure. You know,
Yeah.
like the common human spirit that we aspire to, right?
Yeah.
And
The nation of heroes, I think, in a
yeah,
sense. Like that's kind of what the Selenians end up aiming at, is like everyone who is here and devotes themselves to like these virtues, these like these good things in life
yeah,
can be a Selenian. That's part of like what they import from the American idea, like the anyone who comes to America, the thing that people like Sam Hyde really don't like. America is just a bunch of values. It's a values-based nation. He doesn't like that. Well, too bad. That's what it is.
mhm,
If you don't like that, maybe you're not an American. He's really not gonna like that.
yeah. And see, and we are of course two non-Americans, but similarly, an ANCAP wouldn't be like an ANCAP on Earth wouldn't be a Selenian, but at least one could say spiritually he's more Selenian than
Yeah,
America's Selenian, right?
they have common cause because the other element of being a Selenian is that you live in a particular place, right? You live in Selene
Yeah,
and you are a participant in the Selenian like national culture, right?
yeah,
Like in the national the values held by that nation, right?
exactly. Yeah,
Likewise, we might be spiritually American because we are deeply holding American values, but because we're not in America yet, we can't really
we're not
we can't get to call
we're
ourselves
not
that.
Americans in such
When
like
we immigrate,
yeah,
inshallah, God willing, right, that it happens,
yeah,
then we will become Americans, right?
yeah.
But not yet. And so, one thing I want to elaborate on, there's actually a plot line about this. There's a narrative about the Selenian like alliances and polity situation. So, the very first Selenian like I guess alliance, big one, is it's formed. It's actually it's co-existent to the like origination of the term Selenian, right? It's all the way back when they're the space status and they're dealing with the Lunarians and they're about to have a war, right? They form what's called CODA, the Coalition Operational Defensive Alliance, right? It's an alliance between the core habitats and a bunch of other ones, so they can fight against the Lunarians, right? Who are going to attack them, invade them, right?
Mhm.
And it's around that time, like that's also the time that Selenian nationalism kind of gets on the bandwagon and like it they come up together. The thing is that CODA ends up collapsing as an institution because it's a voluntary membership, like defensive alliance, and the administration of that alliance ends up being disconnected from the desires of the membership of the alliance. And it's a big moment because in our own history, in American history, what happened was the Union became pre-existent over the constituents of that union, right? Like the states are now like they can't depart from the union by their own volition, right? Obviously, they're states in the first place, so there's a problem there. But like,
Yeah,
but in the case of the Selenians, Coda gets disassembled without a civil war happening. Like the membership just kind of keep like withdrawing until the whole thing unravels because there's no one paying membership dues to the administration, so it stops existing.
yeah.
And it's around that time that the new Selenian defense architecture kind of rolls into gear, which is defense insurance companies kind of become a big element. They kind of become like the non-geographic element there, where what will happen typically is you'll have like a habitat, like a city or like an orbiting like city or something, and that will have like some corporate property arrangement, which will be, it's not like common property, but it's contractually bound in a number of significant ways. And then the corporate administration of the station will hire a defense insurance agency to insure it. They're like, please make sure that we are safe from everything between like petty crime to terror threats, right?
Mm.
And give us the premium for that, and also institute the measures that would reduce our premiums, right, by having like security measures, right? And they're like, okay, and so they um they hire defense insurance, and defense insurance is non-geographic. Like it doesn't have a specific like jurisdiction. Um, it's just where they get hired. But they are a Selenian institution, right? And they cooperate with each other, as much as they compete.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of your like top level of the hierarchy. Um, and then you have like alliances. They kind of become parallel institutions to an extent. So like you have like the assembly. Assemblies are not redundant because there's still like property owners who have common concerns, but you end up having these like corporate institutional arrangements sometimes like private cities, right? Where instead of having like a group of different property owners, you have this city which is owned by one guy under like a bunch of contractual obligations to other people, so he has to fulfill certain functions on behalf of like the corporation. So then it's administered by like a company, and they rent out plots or they sell plots like a condominium, like a condo, right? A condo corporation.
Yeah.
And that way it has like a single vision to it. And that is, it's more like Singapore except based in Ancap,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so these become sort of like parallel institutions in Selenian society, and they relate to each other.
And
And the overall security
one can
architecture.
one can
Yeah.
imagine this instead of simply a rationalistically put together state apparatus. Oh, we just sat around in a bunch of rooms and we just came up, oh, there's going to be only three levels of government, no more, no less, right? And we're going to have only three levels of court systems, no more, no less. And it's going to be the same court system, and we're going to select the judges the same way. And how do we know that this is the best way possible? We don't, right? We're just
We
making,
figured it out. We platonically inferred that it's the
yeah.
best government.
Exactly. Like if that's what they're gonna say in eventually. Like if they try to justify it, but if they're like honest, they're like we're just like kind of guessing it. We're
Yeah.
throwing. It's the economic calculation problem. You don't have a market, you don't know, right?
Well, one thing is like it's you can appreciate what the founders had difficulty with because when you're
Yeah,
making a decision on behalf of an entire like nation against their will to some extent, right? Because you're building a state,
yeah,
but you have this like kind of moral concern to defend their liberty, then it becomes very important to you to try to get it right. And it's very stressful. It's like, well, we can't do this wrong, so we have to do this right the first time, and we can't change it because if you change it, you're playing with the apparatus of coercion, right? You're playing with the apparatus of aggression, which is dangerous to liberty, right? On the other hand, in the new astronaut situation, in the Selenian situation, it becomes really easy to change institutions because none of the institutions have the power to aggress on people. That's always illegal.
mhm,
And so the only thing that you're like fundamentally limited by is the change to my institution going to violate some contract I have, or is it going to aggress on someone, right? But apart from that, if there's some arrangement that is probably better and you can convince enough other people, you can change your habitat to run like that. So one thing I've considered playing with, right, is that there could be so in the modern contemporary time, most Selenians live on orbital stations that orbit the moon, right? Because they get to spin and they get to have like proper gravity. And the moon is kind of like a big rock where lots of mining happens. It's kind
mhm,
of like Western Australia is to the rest, like the urban centers of Australia, right? So I live in Sydney. Western Australia is like mostly a barren wasteland filled with mining pits, but it's way bigger. It's like what
yeah,
you see, right? And so like the urban population of Selenians, they live on the space stations that are orbiting very close to the moon, right? And what one idea I had played was like, what if there's a orbital station, like a habitat, which is run similarly to the Federation from Starship Troopers, where in order to be granted residence by like the Covenant community, right? You have to engage in some kind of like military service on behalf of the station, right? Like you have to join the company as like a security personnel, right? And that way it demonstrates your commitment to the values of that station, right? To the values of that community. It's like you
yeah,
could do that, right? That's one possible arrangement. And I'm like, that's an interesting idea. I don't know where I would fit it into a story, but it sits in my brain. And so like that happens all the time, I imagine, in this lean context. Because like, in each case, right, for different communities, they have different needs, right?
yeah.
And so different needs
And
then emerge in different
oftentimes,
institutions.
oftentimes, like the modern statist institutions. There are almost bad analogies to what might actually exist, like in a free society.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like
Yeah,
one thing I imagine when I write the Selenians is like I sometimes take like what if we had this American state institution and we only deleted aggression from it. So
yeah,
for instance, like what if we took the CIA and we only made the CIA we took the CIA and all we did was we made it not violate the NAP, but everything else it did was a function that it continued performing. So like, collecting intelligence on foreign adversaries or conducting operations to assassinate terrorists or, like doing all these things. These things are legal. They might not be profitable, which is why the CIA might fail as a company. But you could imagine some combination of the things that the CIA does could be profitable in the right context. Because, like, suppose that you're trying to defend your space city, well, obviously it would be in your interest to be aware of potential terrorist threats against it. So there is probably some business model for an intelligence company, and I have a depiction of that in the Selenian context. It's called Levi-Rook Defense Intelligence Company, right? That's kind of like
yeah,
the Selenian CIA, the Ancap CIA,
yeah. And
right?
you know, we did talk about this, but interventionism as such is not necessarily a bad thing. It's like let's think about the Vietnam War intervention. So
Mm,
uh, the capitalist US, capitalist, but let's go with it.
yeah.
The capitalist US supported the capitalist South Vietnamese or more capitalist South Vietnamese
Mm,
against the communists of North. Sounds good so far.
yeah.
Where did the problem begin? Number one, how did they fund the war? Well, that's through theft.
Inflation.
So
Oh, that's stealing.
that's a problem. Number two, you know, how did they? What do you say? How did they get the men to fight the war? That's
Get
conscription. So that's slavery. So that's a problem. You know. Number three, how did they actually fight the war? Well, they used chemical agents and bombs a lot. So that's mass aggression. You know.
And there's also like the meta level of like what is their theory of victory, right?
Yeah.
It's if we fight the enemy army sufficiently well, we can defeat them in combat, which is it's not a correct model of the situation because the enemy army is not an organized group of people. It's a population which doesn't want you there. And so if you're trying to maintain the population but defeat the enemy army, you're going to fail by
Yeah.
default, right?
Exactly.
Um,
And
so
perhaps retreat to
yeah,
the places that want you there and stay there.
that's
Perhaps
yeah, that would
make,
be that's the
yeah,
thing.
perhaps
So
make a city state out of Saigon instead of trying to
exactly.
hold all of South Vietnam. You
And
know?
so that's something that I try to depict in this leaning context is this sort of like because I have a very deep anti-war like sentimentality to me. I'm
Oh,
very
me as well.
like I'm very Scott Horton like, in some sense,
Yeah,
I really don't like seeing people get exploded all the time. I
for
mean, my
sure, for sure.
family,
It's the most,
yeah,
like the way I say is that in in dealing with people, even if you think that they're really, really bad, you got to really avoid war unless and until it's the last alternative.
yeah. Because
You know?
there's like two questions, right? When it comes to the question of like, let's say should we overthrow Saddam Hussein and we're the moon, we're Ancapistan, right? Like the one question is like, is it legal to overthrow Saddam Hussein? Which is yes,
For sure.
because he's guilty of murder and you can prosecute him on someone's behalf, right? I'm sure there's at least one Iraqi who'd be like, I would like Ancapistan to blow up Saddam Hussein, right?
Yeah.
And that's enough justification for like someone to prosecute Saddam Hussein on that person's behalf, right? Because they are delegating their right to like retribution, right?
My
And
hair is looking unreasonably good today. Do you think so as well?
I think so too. Yeah, you got
Like, I don't know what I did. I
the
just took a
luscious
shower.
hair.
Continue, continue.
Yeah.
Good.
I have to do like hair gel because otherwise my hair will just like sit here, and it's just like flat and it's not very good. Um, what was that? Oh yeah, but then there's a second question, right? Like, is it prudential? Is it prudent to overthrow Saddam Hussein? And the answer is probably not, because even if it's justified, like from a purely legal perspective, the killing of Saddam Hussein is not going to improve the general social situation in Iraq because
Yeah.
Saddam Hussein is not the fountain of the problems that the Iraqi people are facing. He is like a face of that problem, but the general problem that the Iraqi people are facing in in the situation like in when Saddam Hussein was still alive, right? Because he's not alive now. He's resting in Tikrit. Um, uh, um, the general problem they were facing has much more to do with the fact that Baathism, Iraqi socialism, well, Arab socialism, is the ideology that is ascendant, right? And that's
Yeah.
not going to change just because you drove in there and blew up Saddam Hussein. What will change is that the other ascendant ideology that it might be there is going to rise up, which is like the Iranian Shiite
Mhm.
whatever there was a kind of a
Exactly.
minority ruling over
And
a majority in Iraq in terms of
the,
like
the
the
kind of
Sunni
premise
Caliphate.
is, you know, the
But the
kind
problem
of
is,
premise.
in general,
Go ahead, go ahead.
defeating them militarily did not change the available ideologies to take the gap. That's the problem.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
there is this kind of premise that, which is the premise of nation building, right? Uh,
Mm.
which is something that I do not think truly capitalist powers would give a shit about. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if you just went into Iraq and you took every child below the age of 10 away from their parents and just, like blasted them with Rothbard, yeah, you're gonna get a lot of Ancaps out of that. you know, like,
We're gonna have the Ancap brainwashing drones. They're gonna be flying over Baghdad. They're gonna be playing the audiobook of Anatomy of the State in Arabic constantly at all hours of the day.
but what's that gonna cost? And the reason nation building, even as a concept, is feasible is because the state has, like it's other people's money that you're allocating. If I am paying for money, wouldn't I rather just do other things with it? Like there are probably
Yeah.
more productive uses of that money, even if we just limit our vision to, one day having a free Iraq, right?
Yeah, so we might get into this in more detail later, but when I depict Selenian interventionism and like political adventurism, like in attempts to like change the outside world to be more ANCAP like, or like military, like, just general military action outside their borders. There's basically like three, well, not just military action, but there's basically like three expressions of like what I would say is like the effects on the outside world in terms of like politics, right? And two of them are largely defensive. So one of them is like the intelligence assets who are checking on threats, who like threats to the Selenian nation or like threats to this habitat, like making sure the terrorists that we know where they are, and if they're planning something that we know that we can stop them, right? And that we can do something about it, right? And then
Yeah,
the number two is where Selenian defense insurance makes a contract with someone who is like amenable to Selenian values that is not in Selene. So like there's a story where there's like a plantation in Australia where they hire Selenian defense insurance to defend them from like criminal gangs.
yeah,
Like, and that's a situation where they are making a business decision, right? They're like, we can profit from this arrangement with these people who might share our values to some extent, right? As well, right? Because obviously the Selenian defense insurance agency is not going to defend like a criminal group on the grounds that they would potentially be criminally liable in Selenian court, right? Someone could take them to court over that, right? Which would not be great.
yeah,
Not great, and not great for your reputation either, right? So on the other hand, but like if there's some group that aligns with their values and it's going to be profitable to defend them in some way, then they would go there and they might defend them, right? And then the third thing, which is not purely defensive, but it's also not really military, is cultural exports, right?
that's
Selenians,
the greatest thing. Like that's actually how you
it's the
change the world.
remnant, it's the remnant strategy writ large. It's like the
Yeah,
if if America was Ancapistan, you would imagine that like instead of having like $1 trillion military budget, it would have a $1 trillion propaganda budget
and
and
and believe me,
privatized propaganda.
the flawed America already does this to an extent. You know,
Yeah, indeed. There's
the
a
the
huge
problem is
American like
what
uh
goes out of America to the rest of the world goes through the lens of two things: the universities and Hollywood, right? And
That's the
so,
thing that the cultural producers have been captured by
yeah,
anti-Americanism. So
but
America no longer really
it's important.
exports
It's
its
important in one sense,
some.
in the sense that even these universities and Hollywood, evil as they are still American. So
Indeed.
there is literally a remnant of individualism there, which is being exported to the world. You know,
The
like,
remnant,
yeah,
the
there's a
American
remnant.
remnant. It cannot be
The,
destroyed.
and you see this in the sense that uh, like people who want to, like, let's say India, it's a very repressive society, right? But because people see certain American movies, because people see certain things, and there are some good American movies, right? Uh, Even if the overall,
Some.
exactly, like people see that and they like
They
it's
imbibe the
that Ayn Rand
values.
thing, right? Like it's even if they you just pick up the dressing sense,
Yeah, because like
right?
this
Even if
also
you
reflects
just
my
pick up
experience.
the dressing sense, you already
Yeah,
are in rebellion to your culture to some extent, and that is a small American remnant of individualism that's reaching you. Now
indeed. So like
imagine if the
this
universities and Hollywood were real, like really, really good, you know? Like if they were for real, if they were
and
doing the show for real.
privatize the universities, privatize Hollywood, Ancap
Exactly.
Hollywood tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Like,
Like
and you're
imagine the
getting at something
world.
about like why art is important. That also
Yeah.
that's another motivating factor. I think I kind of mentioned this earlier, but like to add a personal element, like art is part of why I am here, like why I'm in the movement today, right? Is like obviously it has to do with my own thoughts, my own interpretations of art. Like I have, I guess, when I apply my mind, like clearly being oppressive and tyrannical is bad, right? So when I watch media, and I watch movies, even if there's like some kind of overt leftist messaging, right? Like when I was like a teenager or like not even a teenager but like a preteen, and they would show you like Captain Planet in school to make sure to like try to brainwash you into environmentalism, brainwash you into like being a global citizen or whatever, right? Like I kind of picked some of that up, but it became really easy for me to drop it later in life because I kind of thought about it. But there are certain things which I never dropped because they're basically true. Like, develop heroic virtues. Like there are things they showed you which had heroes in them, So
Yeah.
develop heroic and you can just see that in art and it inspires you. And you're like, okay, I need more of that, right? And that's part of why I'm making new astronauts.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you know, go ahead, go ahead. Like
Well,
keep
I mean,
going with this.
I have the next slide which talks about the Karandans. I mean, I think I kind of covered them
Yeah.
to some extent. They are like the minarchist. They're like the evil twin brother who right who
Evil.
you like is misdirected in some sense, right?
Yeah.
And I
Misdirected.
mean the thing about the Karandans is they're kind of meant to be a tragic tale because they somewhat reflect the story of America that we see in our world, right? Like there was this very deliberate move to try to create a liberal, like liberty-oriented society. There was a liberty-oriented philosophy of the day that had some level of victory. It was not fully consistent. It had problems with it, but there was a deliberate effort to move towards it and to save like man's mind and enshrine it and enshrine man's natural rights, right?
Hmm.
But the existence of the state corrupted the American institution, and like the general degradation of philosophy led to the kind of America we have today, where we have this sort of like this tension between what America's like values were and like the kind of spirit of America, and then like the technocratic institutions and the pragmatism that kind of has become ascendant in the
Yeah.
in the state, the
And
government, right? Like the
I would point to
representation.
something. The state isn't even like this is something coming shockingly from an Ancap. I would say the existence of the state in America was not that big of a problem compared to the problem which was the existence of Immanuel Kant and his philosophical, you know,
Mm.
students. The problem is if Aristotelian philosophy was dominant, there would eventually would have been a Rothbard, and this error would have been corrected, just as the error of
Yeah,
slavery
you
was
could imagine you could
right.
imagine an American history where like they disassemble the union. I mean, that's kind of what happens to the Selenians, right? Like they have Coda, which is like their it's almost a proto state, but it doesn't collect taxes. It collects membership dues. And then there's this moment where they're like, okay, either Coda is going to force its members to stay in and pay membership dues, which is like it becomes a state and collects taxes, or its members are going to disassociate from it, and there is not going to be a civil war because we don't believe in that, and we don't do that anymore. We don't do that because we believe in natural law, and
Yeah.
it kind of went down the correct path there because they had the philosophy to do it, right? Whereas in the United States, they and the thing is, if you read like the Federalists, if you read about the founders at the time, there is this explicit statist philosophy to them, right? Like there's this tension there, right? There's and so it it is right to give credit to the founders, but there's also this point where like the founders explicitly wanted a state, right? And some of them wanted it a lot more than others, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, part of it is we can't blame them because they didn't have the philosophical technology
Yeah.
at the time. But the other thing is you can't exonerate someone for not thinking, right? For not thinking about it
I,
carefully
I would
when they did
agree.
have almost the
You
right
know?
tools there to realize like, well, clearly there's a contradiction between the natural right to property and the idea that there's a sovereign who can take your property away at will, right?
Yeah, but you see, these people were trying to imagine, like, number one, uh, these were not philosophers. They were the second degree of it. They were philosophical men of action. So they
They
were
were
okay.
students,
Yeah, like, we got the philosophers, we got the philosophy. It's pretty good. Now let's implement it. So they were on the implementation stage. You know.
Yeah.
So there's that. So, like, if you want to blame someone, blame John Locke. You know. So
But I
and
think even then, like you can't exonerate an engineer for using like bad science to build his structure. You can't exonerate the student for not
you could,
thinking, right?
but
I know, I,
but you
I
could
know I'm kind of
blame.
being harsh, but
Yeah, no, no, no.
I agree with you that like
Yeah,
you have to. There is this right way of thinking where it's like you can't judge someone. You can't accurately judge someone the difficulty that there is there of trying to come up with that.
yeah,
Uh, but you also can't say that they didn't do anything wrong, right?
yeah,
You have to
for sure,
balance
for
the
sure.
view that like these are clearly virtuous men who were trying their best, but
Yeah,
like they didn't. There's a tragedy to them, right?
yeah.
That's
I would agree with that. But I would be fair enough to say that they were great engineers.
indeed,
They
yeah,
were
I agree. Like
the best
there
of the
was
best
definitely
in
great
engineering.
effort there.
But it is a tragedy that none of them ascended and fixed the overall theoretic structure. You know.
Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't that long after the foundation of the United States when individual anarchists actually came out and started talking about the ideas of individual anarchism that are basically anarcho-capitalism, like
Mhm.
with like a less like with a
Clear
less
vision.
clear theoretic base, but they did have the right idea. They were correct on the politics in the sense that like the state is clearly contradictory to natural rights theory, so we can't have it, right? They didn't have praxeology, they didn't have objectivism, but they
Yeah,
did have an idea that well, okay, clearly there can't be contradictions.
yeah.
And clearly natural rights theory is true, so
Mhm.
therefore the state can't be legitimate,
Mhm.
right?
And,
That's
and I
that's
do
pretty
believe
easy. And then the other thing is like
if we
they had general theories
continued
of
in,
heroism.
yeah, but if we did
Yeah,
continue in an Aristotelian era, that would have culminated in the US dissolving its state eventually. You know?
indeed. Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so the Corandons are kind of like they're meant to re show that tragedy again
Mhm.
in a different context, right? Because the Corandons they are not the Americans in like ideology because they have natural rights theory, right? They have the Rothbardian natural rights theory, and they have their but the thing is they have their own novel interpretation of it, in the sense that like they view guardianship as a potential argument for this overarching apparatus that takes guardianship on behalf of its like people, on behalf of its polity, right? Which is there's an error there, which is actually quite subtle, but it is enough of an error that it leads to the construction of a state, right? Which is like, well, because we're guarding your will, we can make decisions on your behalf, right? Regarding your property, right? So we can take your money to finance things that you would have bought because because of your if you were exercising your will properly, you would have bought that, right?
Yeah.
Right? So you if you were exercising your will properly, you would buy defensive services. So we're going to buy defensive services on your behalf, right?
It's a sort
That's
of paternalism.
very subtle,
Yeah.
but it's very clearly the thing is that the Kurandans view legal competency as something that is much is a little bit rarer than what we generally the general standard we apply, that like you kind of know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
Even if you're stupid and you're like, I'm gonna bang this stick on this like oil drum, right? Like even if you're stupid, you know that you're banging a stick on an oil drum, right?
Yeah.
Like you might, but like if you're a child, what it means to be a child is that you don't even know like what the consequences like of banging like what banging the stick on an oil drum, what the oil drum even contains, what even it is, what the consequences of that are going to be, right? That's what it means. Like if and that's the point where you could take guardianship. It's like you don't know you're doing something and you have a desired end, but the desired end is different to like what is actually going to happen, right? This it's the same thing about like someone who's staring at their phone and they're about to walk into traffic and you
Yeah.
grab them by their hoodie and you pull them back. They are doing an action and they do not desire to be pancaked by a truck, but the
Yeah.
action is going to lead to that. And so
Yeah.
if you protect their will by stopping their action, you're acting on their behalf, right? And so the Quran state tries to apply that on the broadest on a large scale, and it says, okay, there are lots of people doing things that they want to like they want to achieve some ends, but the consequences of their action are not actually going to lead to that. They're not actually going to get like a functioning society. They're not going to get security if they don't actually apply the like if they don't actually support this like larger institution, if they don't pay for the security services. So we can act on their behalf. That's what their state is justified under. That's what their theory of the state is,
Yeah.
right? And I
Mhm.
think I don't know if any actual minarchist subscribes to that particular theory, because I came up with that on my own, which was
Mhm.
basically I took the Rothbardian tradition that we believe in, like as Ancaps, and I was like, what if I took guardianship and I made it evil, I right? And to there's a certain extent to which like the Quran state is less liberal than it's like it's post-liberal to it in a certain sense, because they view the citizens as children, right? That it has a deep, very paternalistic and like technocratic
Yeah.
element to it, even if it is like also, you have natural rights that need to be protected, right? Like, and that's why we're here. That's why daddy government is here, right? And
Yeah.
so that's the Karandans, and they end up, building their empire, and then they have this imperial collapse because they end up accumulating debt and military commitments, and all the things we associate with that, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then what's on the next slide? We have illustration and design. So, I mean, this is just me posting a bunch of images that I've done recently. Not even recently. Some of this is old stuff. For instance, she doesn't have that surname anymore. Um, so here I think I'll talk about characters a bit later, but like illustration and design is a big element in New Astronauts because I'm an illustrator and I'm making comics, and the visual medium, you just get to be much more explicit in the visual medium than you can be in prose, that I find. That might
Yeah.
just be my skill issue. I might just need to be a better writer, but um, it's just, it's I like to see pictures. That's why we want the show,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and so illustrations and design, I do a lot of that, and um, design is also very important because obviously there's like the technical element of illustration, but then design is actually thinking about what is this thing that I'm drawing? How is it supposed to work? How does there's an engineering brain to it,
Yeah.
which appeals to me because I'm pretending to be an engineering student at university.
Oh, me.
Um, I'm pretending like I'm gonna get an engineering job when I graduate instead of just, I don't know, finding some random office thing. I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get there, right? I have a plan. Um, But yeah, so illustration and design. What's next? Oh, comics. So I actually have one comic that I released, finished. If you go to 5chronic007.github.io, you can read Moonset. Now, Moonset is what I call a legacy story because it includes material which I've removed from the setting as it exists now. And also, it's also a crossover story with a friend of mine. It's like his setting like invades my setting. It was a thing we were doing. We have this world building server that we're on, and so we
Yeah.
were having this sort of fun thing, and I made this comic um, to participate in that, and um, it was it was partly done just to test myself. Can I finish this one thing and actually put it out? Because you know artists we're notoriously often perfectionists. We're like, well, I can't let this out until like finish it properly, and then you just never finish it, so it just never gets done, right? It's a problem, and so I did this specifically to like get myself to finish something. It's like I need to finish something, like finish this comic, like finish this Straw Horse, so that you can actually like say that you've done something with your life, right? And then upcoming, I have this comic that I'm gonna write and illustrate, which is called Flashpoint. This is just a thumbnail I drew for like a potential cover for it. But Flashpoint, it's basically the story of the Corandon, the Rebel War, the Civil War at the end of their imperial history. And that's gonna be something I illustrate and draw,
Mhm.
and hopefully it ends up being pretty good. 'Cause, Flashpoint is gonna be it's gonna be a lot long. So Moonset is only like 20 pages long, and it's a very condensed story. Flashpoint Flashpoint is probably gonna be like multiple volumes, and it's gonna be like dense. It's gonna have like dialogue and characters that like continue to exist for a while. It's gonna have like a full plot, and that's gonna be a lot of work. So I might just not do it. I might just give up. But hopefully not, and hopefully I'll release it, and we'll get something interesting going on there. All right, next up we have characters. I guess here I'm just going to talk about like I have a bunch of different like named characters who appear across the setting, but more generally the type of characters I portray, right? Like there's a sense in which people like Ayn Rand heroes are so difficult to relate to because they're so perfect, and in a sense, you know, Ayn Rand answered that criticism in the sense that like she's depicting what is relevant to the heroic archetype in her characters, right? So depicting like struggle or like flaws would not fit with what she's trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Which I respect and I see that. But like there's an element of heroism in struggle and in dealing with
That's
your situation
something.
in like
Yeah.
aspiration.
Yeah. That's something I really, and see, I love Ayn Rand novels. However, I just hope she was alive for much longer and was a fiction writer for much longer. Do I actually hope that? Because then that means we get less philosophy. I don't know what I hope. Like I hope her lifetime was not scarce and we just got infinite philosophy and infinite fiction from her. That's what I hope.
Immortal Ayn Rand, Cyborg 9000. Don't worry, we'll get it done.
Yeah, and
We'll resurrect her.
yeah,
And so, but
you know,
so when
I
I
think
when I
this
write
is something.
characters, oh go
Yeah,
on. I don't want to interrupt you.
yes, yes. There's something she missed out on, which was eventually creating like the one reason why people might have a difficulty relating to Howard Roark or John Galt, and this is where I believe We the Living is much better, in that one sense, in the sense that I see did it is two questions: can a hero deteriorate, and can a bad man redeem himself? You know,
Yeah.
uh,
And the other thing is like,
yeah, and even screw redemption. It's uh, formation. How did Howard Roark come to be Howard Roark? You know that
he
I,
wasn't
I
just
want
genetically Howard Rourke. He he
exactly.
he developed a set of ideas,
Yeah,
and it's also like it's just generally true that we all struggle in our lives and we develop over time, right?
yeah,
Like no one like you have to develop the ideas, the correct ideas, and like you could imagine there's a person who just only develops the correct ideas, but I don't think even Ayn Rand could credibly claim that for her whole life she had all of the correct ideas,
Yeah,
right? We can't really ask her, but
exactly. And I
I
want to
think
see
she would
that
say that
arc,
she
you know?
struggled to get to the point where she was. She rose to the challenge, right? And that's a
Yeah,
heroic thing in and of itself. To
I,
rise to the challenge of
exactly.
thinking, to develop yourself from an inferior state to a superior state, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of what I want to depict in heroic characters,
Mhm.
and also depicting the genuine heroism, because there's the fallacy of depicting the flawed hero, as in like the hero who does evil things sometimes, versus the person who rises to the challenge of heroism, the person who faces the difficulty and faces themselves in order to do good things, right? Who overcomes what wrong-headed premises they might have, and like develops themselves to a better state,
Yeah.
right? There's a difference, and I want to depict the better of that, like the one where it's about being a hero rather than being like a quasi-hero, like an anti-hero or something, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, on the flip side of evil characters, right? There's a diversity in evil, like I mentioned earlier. There are people who commit evil actions because it pleases them. Like there are psychotic murderers, criminals, etc., whatever, right? And I have a few of those in the setting to depict the full like
Range of human
grotesquerie
potentialities.
of
Yeah.
evil, right? But also, there's a number of people who the common phrase is like the banality of evil, who do evil things because it's their job, because it's just kind of what they do. It's just the thing, right? They don't think about it. It's not a complex. It's not even like a motivation out of pleasure or anything. It's an apathetic desire. And then there's also the types of evil that are committed in an aspirational method, like I described earlier, right? So there's a diversity of villainous behavior. And so the common balance I want to strike is villainous behavior should always be condemned. Like evil is evil. You can't there's no getting around it. But the complex motivations around evil behavior should be analyzed carefully, because you as a human being, you need to analyze your own reasoning, make sure it's correct so that you don't end up committing evil actions, right?
Yeah.
Which is less of a concern for like psychotic elements, because their motivations are extremely simple to analyze. It's like I just like hurting people. It's really fun to me, and I think it's really cool, right? But on the other hand, it's like I'm aspiring to create a better situation for all of us, and on those grounds, I'm going to commit these evil actions, right? That is
Mhm.
a much more difficult proposition to
Of-
analyze,
Yeah.
but it is important to analyze it so that you can relate to that, but not sympathize with that.
Mhm.
And you can understand why that is wrong, and therefore combat it effectively, right? To defeat your enemy, you must understand your enemy, right? And so that's why it's important to have like characters that are representative here, because it's you need to be able to see them in yourself and in the world in order for the fiction to relate to reality properly, right? This is kind of part of the authenticity and reality principles in the aesthetic uh, process, right? Is that they have to reflect the kind of things you encounter in life. And Ayn Rand understood this. So I think I developed my aesthetic philosophy like principles before I actually learned about like romantic realism. So it's kind of funny, the convergent evolution there. I think I kind of imbibed some of it vaguely by listening to Zulu or someone talk about it, like but I didn't actually like sit down and like understand her position until like afterwards. I think
Yeah.
I might have amended things later, so it's not completely novel. I'm not gonna claim that I reinvented romantic realism, um, but I think it's somewhat obvious. Not it's something you can discover just by thinking like, well, what do I want out of fiction? I want something that shows me a world that could be, and a world that I might want to be in, right? And that
I want
kind
to
of
point
gets you to
something out.
romantic realism.
Yes, yes. I want to point something out though. It's obvious because you held certain premises. However, let's say someone who holds the malevolent universe premise, right? To them, what fiction should do is take them away from this cruel world and towards a better world. You know, like for them, fiction is a source of escape. You know,
That's true.
and
And
so you know,
well, there is an
it is
alternative, is
obvious.
that fiction should reflect the malevolent universe. It should show you how bad the universe really is.
Mhm. That would be the cynic, but a malevolent romantic would want to escape. You know,
Malevolent romantic want to escape. You're
I
right,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, you know, someone like
Mhm.
Byron. Uh, and so you're gonna see like someone's psychoepistemological premises are what is going to determine what do they think they should get out of fiction. So, and this is where objectivism comes in, which is uh, what's the correct thing? Well, what's the correct position on this? The correct position would flow from the correct psychoepistemological premises, right? But
Yeah, and I think the you can kind of see the development of new astronauts reflect my psychoepistemology, right?
yeah,
Because in the beginning, it's just a tabletop setting, right? It's just like I need science fiction so I can run my game, and my game just has cool things in it, right? And it's not that complex. And then when I start adding things to it, there's very little connective tissue because all it is, the motivating element there is I just like cool science fiction stuff. And even some of the early like writing for the setting, it kind of resembles The Expanse to an extent because I'm just kind of reflecting what I see in the world, and it's somewhat cynical too. It's like, well, we're just gonna have like these imperial conflicts forever. There's gonna be attempts at like a libertarian society. It's gonna kind of exist. I had the Selenians even back then when I was like a minarchist, so they were minarchists back then, but then they evolved.
mhm,
Um, and we're gonna have these conflicts. We're gonna have like just it's gonna keep going on and on forever because that's what we've seen in the past. So it's gonna keep going into the future. And but then like it just didn't very connect very well because it had a bunch of disconnected like concepts and premises that weren't unified because I didn't have a unified philosophical view of the world, and also I also didn't have like the confidence to depict a world that I would like really want, right?
yeah,
Because in a sense, I kind of I had that view that like goodness is unrealistic to some extent. It's like your aspirations are constrained by reality. On the other hand, but then when I finally like got into objectivism, I realized like your aspirations are bounded by reality, but the fact there is reality is what there is to aspire to in the first place, right? So, in order to command nature, you must obey it, but you do get to
yes.
command nature by obeying it, right?
That's Francis
Like,
Bacon.
exactly, yeah. And so that's that realization gives oneself the confidence to say, actually, there can be a good arrangement of things. There can be a better arrangement of things than there is right now. There is something you can imagine like that. And and it's not fantastical, right? Fantastical in the sense like it's something imaginary, something that can't be achieved, right?
Yeah,
It's science
it's
fictional.
real.
It's
Yeah,
realistic.
yeah,
That's what I aim for.
mhm,
And and
yeah,
so that's what I try to aim for in characters as well. I have some specific characters here. I have two. They're just kind of characters who, I mean, you can call them main characters. They have some plot lines. So this is Sarah. Sarah works for Ferrapage Defense Insurance Company, and her plot line is it kind of covers that sort of Selenian defensive intervention behavior where like Ferrapage will contract with a company on Earth to defend their stuff, or Ferrapage will is just defending like a space station and they are like engaging in preemptive activity to defend them, right? Or like they're doing security monitoring. They might just do general like anti-crime uh, patrolling behavior, right? Um, and so her story kind of interfaces with that whole narrative, right? So she's from the contemporary, like from the 2200s of the story, like the 2200 years, right? Like 23rd century, um, where that the Selenian like apparatus is ascendant, and the Karandans are, I believe I set her birthday to be like 1 year before the Rebel War, right? So like the Karandan like there's a sense in which um, to Sarah and the next character, Mira, the Corandon relationship with Celine is like the previous generation's war, right? It's what the last generation did in politics, right? And now our generation has a different duty, has a different like has to reckon with the new political astropolitical environment, right? That's kind of like her relationship to the politics of the world, right?
Yeah. I would
And
slightly correct you there. They have a new responsibility, not a new duty.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They have a new
Mhm.
responsibility. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
not like they've been saddled with it. It's like there's a new opportunity in the world,
Yeah.
right? There's a new situation, right? And Sarah, I mean, she's an interesting character in that it, from a personal perspective, she's meant to embody this sort of heroic archetype. But there's also a sense of discovering your own identity as a hero, right? Where um, well, obviously, one thing is that she's a female. She's a woman, but she's in like defense insurance, and she ends up being in like very high stakes environment. And I'm not going to say that's normal. She's an abnormal person in that context. But the Selenians, they don't import like the girl boss feminism we have. So she's evaluated by the same standards. She's evaluated by like the objective standard of like what is good policing, what is good defense insurance, what is good tactical behavior. And so she has an abnormal personality for a woman, and even for like, like a human, like being in that extreme end of the tail. But she is not like completely like she's not like a man with tits. She has feminine desires, right? She has this complex personality that she's dealing with discovering. But that's not to say that she's like paralyzed by this like strange identity she has. She's out there, she's discovering, she's confident. She develops confidence by going out and confronting the challenges that in the world and in discovering her own personality. And so that's kind of her
Yeah.
story as like a character.
Mhm.
And what she lets us explore from like a narrative and meta-narrative perspective is like the Selenian political relationship and also um, the Selenian relationship with soldiering and with someone with like with gender relations because
Yeah.
I envision like what do gender relations look like in a society which is not like dominated by the current view of gender relations, but also not like some kind of regressive, women belong in the kitchen type gender
Mhm.
relations. Like, something that's genuinely like, future oriented and objective. That's kind of what I try to depict, right? And so there's a similar element with that with the next character, but less so because she's not usually in a like much more paramilitary or militaristic context.
Yeah.
So I'll just go to the next page. Here we go. This is Mira. And Mira is my profile picture on Twitter. This is the little animation I based off of an Ace Attorney animation. So she has a little smug like bow. It's really funny, and I that's been my profile picture for like 2 years or something.
Yeah.
It's really great. And Mira she's in the same generation as Sarah. I think Mira is like born like 2 years later. So they're in the same generation and they attend the same like Astro Military College, right? So they're in the same sort of like field, but Mira goes into defense and intelligence. She works for Leviruk, right? And she has a more like um tormented personality in the sense that when I originally wrote her, she was kind of like an anti-hero, right? Because she was like working for the CIA, the Ancap CIA, right? But as I've written her over time, I've kind of written her to have like a different kind of heroic narrative in terms of confronting one's own um, tendencies. Because she develops a bunch of like bad premises and bad tendencies, and then she recognizes it. She's like, I need to confront myself. I need to overcome these things I have and become a better person. I become and improve and face the world, right? Rather than succumbing or claiming that like this is just part of me. I am a flawed person. It's a no. I have these challenges to overcome type deal, right? And so likewise, she has a similar but different kind of self-discovery process, and also she interfaces with a different part of like the Ancapistan security apparatus, where like Sarah is much more on the side of like directly engaging with defensive action, military action, right? And almost like more personable, like because she's like directly engaging with clients. Mira is on like the I'm part of the Ancap CIA side, so we're like secretly spying on people. Sometimes we might assassinate people if we have to, right? Like it's very like cloak and dagger, very sinister, but kind of cool because everyone knows that spies are cool, right?
Yeah.
Um, that kind of thing, right?
Mm,
And so that's Mira. What's next?
yeah.
Oh,
By the way,
meta-narratives. What's up?
I was trying to find some like I was trying to find your channel, and like I accidentally played your video. So you know that was something. So like if you heard a noise, that was that. I was
No,
just
I
trying
didn't
to
hear
find.
anything.
Oh, fair enough.
That's okay. Don't worry, don't worry.
Then this is just useless. Go
No,
ahead.
it's fine. I'm happy to hear that my video is getting played.
Yeah.
The most activity my YouTube channel has seen in years.
Yeah.
Oh. So, meta narratives. Another word for this is like recurring themes. This is like stuff that I try to touch on in everything I write or every story I tell. Is like heroism. So like I'll just go through this. Like heroism as something that is possible, realistic, and available to ordinary committed people. So like heroism in ordinary life, it really is an expression of it's expressing your virtues, right? Going out and confronting the world, right? That's what it is really to be heroic. And so that is available to you as a normal person, If you have anxiety about taking phone calls and you confront that and you develop courage and you call to do your interview or whatever, you are engaging in a small act of heroism in that moment, right? Right? And I really encourage people to think of it that way because this is your life. You have this life, and when you overcome things and you face your challenges and you develop your virtues and you acquire your values, that is what it means. That's what it is to be a heroic life to face these challenges, right? And like the more challenging things are, obviously, extremely difficult challenges make for great heroism, right? That's kind of what we admire great heroes for being like, turbo strong, like facing the enemy and facing these great challenges. And even if they aren't triumphant, like there's like heroes who might fail because they were insufficient in some way. But the fact that they faced them is like it's ennobling in and of itself, right? Um, Oh, I do. That's actually something I want to distinguish because there's stories where the hero fails because heroism is insufficient, which is a
Yeah.
bad story. That's like a bad value. And then there's the story fails where the hero fails not because heroism is insufficient, but because they were overwhelmed by the odds, right? But that doesn't suggest that heroism itself is bad in
Exactly.
some way or like is insufficient. It's just that, you know, there might have been no way out, but they faced the odds anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because they it was the right approach anyway. It's like if the candy bar Martian is there, right? The heroic thing to do is to refuse the candy bar Martian, even in the face of such great odds, like even in the face of Armageddon, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Though we
yeah,
have
I understand
developed,
some controversy on that
we have
question.
developed like the new,
We have the new
angle.
theorem on that, yeah. But like in general, like
Yeah. Like
heroism in
one
the
could
face
say
of
this way.
yeah.
One could say it this way. Like, you know, suppose you are starving and like you're
Mhm.
starving and down and out, and like
You
every
steal
like
bread to save your
yeah,
life.
you shouldn't do that.
Mhm.
You know, uh,
Indeed, yeah.
in the sense that like and even here there's a big caveat because what is stealing, that is something very social, right? Like for example, what the non-aggression principle tells us is that you're not supposed to violate someone else's property rights,
Which
but
can be
we
understood as you're not supposed to use things in a way they wouldn't like it to be used. But many people
exactly
who have food wouldn't mind someone who is starving to death taking it. It's like, I
exactly
would probably consider that. If you were starving to death, if you were like an emaciated person, I probably wouldn't like to see you in my kitchen. But like
Yeah.
I would understand if you took some of my bread. I would be like I would probably forgive you,
Yeah.
after I understood the situation, I'd be like, okay, you know what? Fair, right?
Yeah.
But
And especially, if you're a good charactered person who's like willing to, now atone or something like that. Not atone,
indeed.
but like pay you back because they understand the causality of where the food
Because,
came
yeah,
from, so on and so forth.
because
So like,
that would be the virtuous response is that like okay,
yeah,
I clearly I it's beyond just the legal question of like was I allowed to do it? Like this person forgives me.
yeah,
The virtuous thing to do is realize, okay, I have imposed a cost on this person
mm,
through my like whatever got me into the situation.
yeah.
And the right thing to do is to reimburse them
Yeah.
because it was
It's so hard.
it was their, willingness to protect me that saved my life. And so I need to they should be rewarded for that, right? They should be rewarded for their
Yeah.
virtue, right?
And
And
there
then
is
yeah.
certainly even an epistemological risk taking every time you do act with someone else's property, because let's just imagine, and this is where much theory needs to really clarify this. Uh, you know, uh,
Mhm.
maybe it's theoretics, maybe it's something that judges need to do and not jurists. That's something we need to think about as well. Which is, let's say, something which is usually communicative of, hey, you are allowed to take this. uh, what if one particular person doesn't want to communicate that? Let's say, uh, you know let's say you live in a place like, you live in a place where people keep lawn chairs outside, and you're allowed to sit there, if you are walking and you're
Mhm.
tired. uh, but let's say one particular guy doesn't want it to happen. Well, did I buy, because I didn't have mens rea when I sat on his lawn chair, because
I
everybody
think the
around me,
general
you know,
my naive answer is that it's like an accident, right? It's like, well, just like once you know, just don't sit in the chair again, right?
oh, for sure. But
Like,
like, it certainly is an aggressive act, is it not? Or is it not? You
yeah,
know,
indeed.
like,
I think there's like it's definitely an aggressive act. There's also the sense in which like the owner has to emborder their property, so he can't just like leave his lawn chair in like the national park, like in the middle of nowhere, because
mhm,
at that point he's abandoned it because he's not
yeah,
defending it, right?
exactly.
He's not actually like uh using it. And I
But
think I have some
there can
insights
be
on that,
edge
which I might
cases like
talk
this.
about.
There can certainly be
Mhm.
edge cases like this in which you certainly are taking a risk. And I would say the
Yeah,
principle
you
there
have
is,
to.
you
Yeah,
know, uh, your mind should be non-aggressive, in the sense, whatever action you're
exactly.
doing, like your mens rea should be non-aggressive. And if there is later you find out that actus reus was there, then that is simply an accident, and all you owe
Yeah,
is
indeed. I think
restitution.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I'll just quickly go through
yeah,
some of these
go
other
ahead.
meta narratives. So like character flaws is something definitely possible to overcome. I think I've already kind of gone over that. Like it's something a challenge that you would face rather than I think a lot of people these days you can kind of see it in like the talk about trauma or like I'm ADHD or I'm autistic or like the people who identify with their mental
Mm,
disorders or people who identify with their trauma or disabilities or whatever, it kind of becomes part of them in like an inseparable way.
mm,
Whereas, and I think that's really unhealthy. I think that contributes
yeah,
significantly to a declining mental health is the idea that like this mental health is like an irrevocable part of you or like mental disorders or something, right? Or this whatever like character flaws like I can't help being a smoker or I can't help being autistic or I can't
yeah,
help so and so, right? And so one thing I want to like depict is like no, character flaws are definitely something that it's possible to overcome
mm.
um, to the extent
Though,
that it's an expression
to an
of
extent,
your
right? Like, if
volition,
someone
right?
is non-verbal autistic, like,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
there's an extent to which like you have to work within the bounds of your neurology, right? So
yeah,
if you're someone non-verbal autistic, you don't have the correct brain structure to speak. But to the
yeah,
extent that you have cognition, to the extent that your actions are an extension of your cognition, that is to the extent that which your character flaws are within your control, right?
yes, I agree.
Um,
Yeah,
and so like um, yeah, that's basically the point. And so um, yeah, like that's kind of something it's important for me to depict because for a while there, I was under the impression that like, I am a certain way and I can't do anything about that, right?
Mm.
And that was it was a very that's part of the mindset which like I mean I didn't have any confidence in life, right? I was an anxious and a depressed person for some time, right? But then, I went to Stoicism, and Stoicism gave me the view, well, okay, if there's one thing in life in which I have total control over, it's my opinions, my pursuits, my decisions. What is cognitive? What is internal to my like
Have you heard about
cognition,
the
right?
Serenity Prayer?
I have heard of the Serenity Prayer. I don't remember off by heart, but it's
Yeah.
very similar. I think
Yeah.
a relationship there.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Basically, objectivism has a similar idea as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because it's true, right? Like
Yeah.
generally like people converge on true ideas because
Yes.
they reference reality and everyone has access to reality, right?
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
this is actually a point which I independently discovered. I'm pretty sure I'm not the first guy to do it, which is, you know, any any person who is, and I'm not talking about philosophies. I'm also talking about philosophies, but I'm more so talking about people. Any person who is, regardless of their priors, if they are reality oriented, if they're, even let's say someone who is a Kantian, right? Like someone who believes in Kant's theories, but they're a reality oriented Kantian. Like let's say the some of our libertarian misdirected brethren are, you know,
Misdirected, brethren, yeah.
right? And it is really funny because their interpretation of Kant is very different from like our interpretation of Kant. They think like he's just talking about how perception works. No, no, that's not true, you know. But
Yeah. There's
yeah,
like I
no,
tried reading Kant like years ago and I'm
yeah,
like,
no,
and
like
the layers of perception I would need to comprehend this man's text, I don't have them. I don't have those categories. This is pure noumena. I'm experiencing pure noumena reading this man's text.
and and see, like even those people, like even those friends of ours, they do, if they are looking at the world, like they do converge on certain truths, which and I think the result is, I do believe that uh, given primacy of like a given primacy of existence philosophical framework existing, eventually convergence will happen, and like primacy of consciousness frameworks, they're divergent, right? Because you
Mhm.
can wish up anything. So any,
Indeed.
even partially or fully, like fully of course, but even partially primacy of consistent mentalities will converge towards certain truths, and those truths might be
Indeed.
in ethics. Those truths might, and specifically, action-oriented fields will have more of those truths, like in ethics and politics, right? The more abstract you go, the harder it is to find that convergence.
Yeah, and I think this is I think I have a controversial take. Um, but I think basically every wrong idea has some real referent that it originates from.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
because I mean that's just clearly because there is no nothing. It's like everyone has to start somewhere.
somewhere. Yeah,
And so every like in every like wrong philosophy, they at least have to start talking about something that is real,
yeah,
right? And that is why even if you're not just like out there to even if they're not just studying philosophy to like try and counteract your opponents, it's valuable to study philosophy as a general introduction to various different kinds of problems and ideas.
yeah,
And because you get to poke at the real things that they are touching and referring to. Like in general, like Stoicism is a Platonic. It's because every Greek was basically Platonic after Plato, right?
yeah,
And so like the Stoics kind of just like import Platonism, but they clearly get a bunch of interesting points correct. Like they're kind of the earliest Western example of like the dichotomy of control and that kind of understanding what is what is your
place.
domain of
Yeah,
action? Yeah. And what is the thing that determines your character is your actions. There's not like some like magical. external um thing that determines whether you're good or evil, and it's not also like intrinsic. It's not like something that you're born with. It's your character. It's your decision making. It's your relationship to the world, right? And that's something you can change as long as you're a volitional creature. And I know there's some argument over whether Stoics are determinists or not, but like if you just read Enchiridion of Epictetus and you read like the first paragraph, like you're already on the road to like, oh, I am in control of my own actions, and that is what determines my like moral status and whether or not I'm enjoying life. You know, that's the more important thing. You know, not more, but like that's the thing that's more referenced in the in Kyrian and Stoicism. Like, how do I get what I want out of life? How do I get good things out of life? Right? How do I live the right kind of life? Because that's kind of what they were worried. That's how they thought of it, which is kind of how we think of it in the egoist like tradition, right?
Yeah.
How do you get what is good out of life, right? How do you not live a vexed life, you know?
Yeah.
Uh, I thought I was gonna go through these quickly, but I keep pausing on everyone. Soldering is an expression of commitment to principle. That's basically just like
Yeah.
how much are you willing to put on the line? It's like this that kind of lines up with the idea of sacrifice. Not talking about self-sacrifice, like you know, altruism, but like making costly commitments on the part of your principles, or like or on the part of things that you're really willing to defend. On the like, you know, up to and including your like survival, right? It might be like I'm willing to fight to the death for my freedom, you know,
We might need a better word
because
than
I
sacrifice
won't
for
live
that.
to be a slave. Yeah, I know there's like the objective definition of sacrifice,
Yeah.
which is talking about self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
But I understand the term is used for a lot of things in like common parlance,
Uh-huh.
and I don't want to try to find a different word for like um, fighting at a very high cost for principles that you hold very dear, right?
Mhm.
Even if they're like selfishly held, right? Like I would fight to the death for my freedom. I would fight to death to protect my legacy or something like that. Like something that's mine, something that's I'm fighting for my own reasons. It's not because I'm fighting to provide someone else a value,
Mhm.
but it is still something that could be extremely costly up to and including one's own life, right?
Yeah.
You know, that's like there's a courageous element to that, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing here is like technological advancement as fundamentally humanistic and not sinister. So like a lot of science fiction, you see this on Twitter. There's like this thing that gets reposted every so often. It's like science fiction authors don't build a torment nexus. Tech bros. So we've decided to build a torment nexus.
Yeah.
Um, like, and I'm like, what if we had science fiction that like depicted technology as not tormentuous? What if technology doesn't cause torment? Have you considered that? Like what if technology is actually fundamentally humanistic and it's perversions of technology which are bad, right?
Yeah.
Technology is generally like fundamentally a good thing. Like it's a fundamentally humanistic thing, right? And it is technology used for evil that is bad, and it's the action that brings. But the technology itself is a good thing, and that's something I really want to put forward. Like a lot of science fiction stories will go like, here's the technological innovation, and here's how we used it to make people's lives worse in this fiction, right? So
Yeah.
like and I want to go, here's this technological innovation. Here's how it makes these people's lives better. And sometimes it's used for bad things, but we stop those people because we have heroes in the world, right? And we and
You know?
but like the fundamental character of the technology is that it improves people's lives. So like one thing that um is in the setting is like there's by the time of like Sarah and Mira, by their like time period, there is the Selenians have developed some advanced biological engineering. So they are able to actually construct like different kinds of organisms to do things, right? And one version of that is there's like a biological brain computer interface that like it kind of ends up inside your skull and it kind of sits on top of your brain pan. And it's like it's this biological, it's like this constructed organism that it pretends to be like something that belongs on your brain, but then it allows you to engage in like radio telepathy. So they can actually like communicate via like radio waves just by
Yeah.
thought, right? And that lets them like puppeteer machines with their mind or just like directly telepathically communicate to each other.
That's
And
beautiful.
like The regular science fiction author would be like, okay, and now here's how I'm gonna teach you how to hack people's brains or like brainwash people with it. And I'm like, no, actually, the technology is developed in such a way where the person who has the implant is fundamentally in control. You
And
can't
that
attack
makes
this.
sense. Like that
Yeah.
makes sense. Why would I buy something that doesn't have that?
Yeah, and I mean like it's not just like why would I buy that? It's like why wouldn't you develop this technology in a way that it's protected in that. Like so one principle I take whenever I talk about like augmentation technology in the setting, because like there's like genetic engineering, there's like implants and all these kind of things that I have to like I think about writing. And I'm like, in any case where someone's getting an implant or this technology is getting the implant should not make them more vulnerable than they are well, naturally, right? So
Yeah,
like for instance, I have eyes, right? And if someone shines a bright light in my eyes, I will like I'll have to cover them or I'll go like, I'll be disoriented, right? If I get a brain radio implant and someone starts like blasting radio waves, that might be disorienting. I might not be able to radio communicate anymore, but it doesn't make me any more vulnerable than someone shining a light in my eyes, right?
yeah,
Whereas if I have a brain implant and that makes it possible for someone to hack my brain, that is more vulnerable than I used to be. So I would not get that, and I would not accept that, right?
yeah,
And so, in general, I depict technological advancement being used for good things and that being the default condition. Because, like, what is technology? It's the application of means to acquire ends. And the natural usage of that is for to acquire values for human life, right? It is the use of technology for conflict, which is an aberration, right?
yeah,
It's a disruption of the process of life. That's kind of, I think that's from the legal perspective, we understand conflict is like it's actions which are mutually exclusive, right? But then if you like, this isn't really a novel observation, but it was like thinking about it really hard was very enlightening for me because like what really is conflict? It's when someone initiates a conflict, they are actually interfering with the behavior of a person that might succeed in acquiring values. So when by engaging in conflict, you are interfering with the very process of life, of human
yes,
life, right?
yes,
Like that's the fundamental. That's why conflict is bad. Like like it interferes with the process of life. That's how you can see it, right?
mhm,
And that's meta narratives. I have a narratives here, which is just basically a bunch of things that happen, like a bunch of different kinds of stories. So like the broad story of Selenian nationhood, the rise and fall of the Crandons, Earth power politics, which I don't really develop very well. I need to work on that. Space colonization and like stateless politics. That's like what is the organization of like Selenian like I kind of talked about alliances, assemblies, defense insurance, that kind of thing. And then there's like some specific stories here, like that happen to specific characters. These might like become like a book, right, or like a comic, right? So like Leviuk, Secret War and the Other Planets, like intelligence, spy stuff, really cool. Fehebaj on Earth, that's Sarah. The Syndicate, that's like organized crime. So I had this story in mind where um, organized crime is trying to get a foothold off of Earth, but to do that, you kind of have to go past the moon because the moon a lot of good space industry happens, right? Just from a realistic perspective, right? You kind of have to stop past the moon, which means that you have to kind of get past the Selenians to do crime in the outer planets if you're on Earth, right? And so that's a Levi-Rook concern. The Lunarian War, that's just its own story. The Rebel War, that's going to be Flashpoint. Oh, Revolutionary Labor Movement. So there's like a labor movement in early space status Selenian history, which um, I one thing I realized while I was writing this, and it's probably like not a surprise to anyone, but like trade unions are literally cartels for labor, right?
yeah,
The same way like the Dow, like the German chemical cartel is a cartel for chemicals,
yeah,
trade unions are cartels for labor. And so clearly that's just bad, right, from an economics perspective. But
yeah,
trade unions are very integrated into the way we see modern society, and not because they don't do something that should be done, because like there is some idea like the relationship between labor and capital, like laborers and capital, like they have to have it's a business relationship. So there has to be some kind of management that with relation to pricing. But like a cartel is not the correct way. That's not the market. So the Selenians end up rejecting the revolutionary labor movement, not least of which because they are a violent Marxist revolutionary group. That's bad. But also because trade unionism as a concept does not make sense to them. And the Selenians end up having like this alternate arrangement for labor relations, which I call like labor exchanges, which is basically like job seeking, except like if you're like a, let's say you're like a steel laborer, you go to a labor exchange and they put out your resume for you kind of. They kind of find places where you would be good to work. And they'd be like, and they come back to you and like for a commission, they're like, here you can go to these places and they'd be good for you, you know, something like that, right? And in that way, it kind of resolves the kind of grievances that trade unionists who are not like ideologically motivated often have, which is like, how can I get the right value for my work, right? That's kind of what the thought is. So like, that's that whole narrative. Lunar Astronautiering Company, that's like an early Selenian thing. The Coda era, I talked about that. The Coda Alliance. Let's see, what else do we have here? Upcoming projects. So Flashpoint comic, I kind of talked about that. That's the Rebel War. A novel with Mira. That's gonna be talking about like cool spy stories. So like Levi does kind of like things like between like police work and spying work from time to time. So like dealing with organized crime is inside their purview, but also dealing with like foreign state actors. So stuff inside that bracket, you know. Another thing is I'm gonna get around to making a proper website because if you go to the website I linked earlier, it's just the comic and it's not really anything interesting. Like there's no like there's nothing fancy about it. So I'm gonna work on that. I'm also gonna work
I
on
was
3D modeling
about
and
to
animation. I
offer,
have stuff I
you
want to
know,
do with it.
I was
What's
about to
up?
offer, help in creating that. Then I remember, oh, you are an engineer too, and so I shut up.
I'm studying software engineering,
Yeah,
and
you
I'm
could
gonna
do
get
it.
around to it eventually. Don't
Yeah.
worry. I'm also there might be a new Astros video game coming out, depending on how well I juggle everything else I'm doing.
I'm gonna
Obviously, I'm
need
gonna get
to
back to
invest in that. I'm
invest
gonna
in the
invest
video
in
game.
that. Yeah.
Oh, I should put my Ko-fi link in this presentation. I forgot to do that. At the end, we're
Oh,
gonna
I'll
see my
add it.
X and my
Don't worry about
YouTube.
it.
Yeah, but
I'm gonna add that.
and then I might experiment with what I call mixed media format, where basically imagine you go to my website and then you click on like I want to read this story, and what would happen is like there'd be like a section of prose, and then it goes directly into a comic, so you just keep reading into the comic, and then the comic like you transition to a video, and it's like a video animation or whatever you watch, and you keep scrolling down, and it goes back to like prose, and it just goes between it smoothly or something, and it's just like one big mixed media story. That's something I might play with. It's just an idea I had, you know. I have
Yeah.
too many ideas. Like, do you see my whiteboard here?
Yeah.
Look at this. It's crazy. There's so much stuff to do, you know.
Yeah.
Too many things to do. And let's see, what else? So this is just Fairpod. I think I talked about them. They're a defense insurance agency. Um, and there are other defense insurance agencies, but this is one I focus on because the way I constructed them, they have like a vertically integrated structure. So they do everything from like providing security like guards to like doing administrative service, right? Where they just administer your policy, right? They do all of that whole thing vertically integrated. Levi, that's the Ancap CIA. Um, and let's keep going. We have these are some other ones. So Sec Insco, that's security insurance company. That's kind of like the it's like the Geico of defense insurance, right? It's well, actually, I don't know about that. I don't know how big Geico, like
Yeah.
how much stuff Geico, but basically the deal with security insurance companies is that they are not vertically integrated. They have like one thing they do. They offer you policies and then they administer your policy. And like if you have guards, they will contract someone else to be your security guards, right? They will contract someone else to install your alarms or whatever. Like they are like the horizontally integrated insurance company, right? This is Golden Serpent, which is the intelligence organization that Coda had, and it's relevant for story reasons. I think this is one thing I didn't mention about Selenians is there's kind of a mutual aid element because we all read Mutual Aid to the Welfare State, and we were
Yeah.
like, wow, mutual aid societies and fraternal societies are so cool, right? And so I was like, okay, what if there's like multiple types, right? Which there were. And so Selenians often have these like fraternal societies which serve as cultural reinforcement elements, not just like mutual aid centers, because eventually Selenians just kind of get very wealthy, so you can just pay for your own treatment, medically speaking. You don't really have to worry about like having a pool of money, right? And but they end up being centers for your cultural enrichment and your like other needs, right? They kind of maintain their cultural function beyond specific like medical function.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, there's like a manpower thing where like if you need someone to watch your kid, like if you're going on a trip, you can ask someone from your they're called kinship societies, right? I call them kinship because they are kin in that kind of sense. They are like this broader extended network of familiar people, right? And um, that's kind of that element. And this is the one of them. This is the Free Heart Society. They have a more like educational function in that they deliberately work on um, like developing education on early life and like making people ready to face the world, like that kind of thing. This is Astropol, which is just Interpol in space. That's I you know um well, okay, there's something more complicated about them because they represent like a relationship between the Earth powers and Selene. Because Interpol is in France,
Yeah.
it's still around. I decided that Interpol as an organization continues to exist, right? And Astropol is Interpol. It's like a division of them, right?
Yeah.
And they get a cool logo. We're almost at the end here, I think. Oh yeah, this is the last slide. So this is where to find me. Um,
Yep.
and so down in the bottom right, you see my X account, you see my YouTube.
I'm also going to
And
put your coffee. Send me the link.
well, let me see. I think my Ko-fi is linked on my X profile. So if I press
Oh,
this, it should open up my X, and then I should be able to see the link to my Ko-fi. There it is, ko-fi.com/ Nikola Pavkovic /
mhm.
commissions. Well, I guess just / Nikola Pavkovic, and then you'll be at my Ko-fi root page. So let's see if I go here. There you are. Ko-fi.com / Nikola Pavkovic. You know what we'll do? We'll just copy that and we'll just go into the presentation and we'll just add it in, you know. Hang on, let's see. Doing this live on stream. Only the most scuffed things here today. Hang on.
Yeah.
Uh, Boom. That, that does not look right.
I'm gonna keep this in.
Oh yeah, I definitely want you to keep this in. This is just this is live technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Let's see. Why is it like that? It's really weird. Why has it got the white background? It's why is it not normal text? Okay, I hit Control K. You know what? And what we'll do, we'll get rid of the background fill. Transparent? Oh, that's not good. That's not it. Get rid of the highlight. I think that's the highlight. There we go. I fixed it.
Yep.
You see, I'm a software engineer. I can fix things. There we go. And then hit the slideshow button.
You know,
Fixed. We did
we did
it.
it.
So yeah, that's where you can find me. That's where you can give me money. Um, uh, I've only ever been commissioned once. Um, and if I get like a billion commissions immediately after this podcast comes out,
Yeah.
please be patient
Yeah.
because I have a million things to do. But I will respond if I get messages, I'm gonna message back because that's my policy, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, but like just be
Yeah.
aware if I go from 0 to 5 full commissions, right?
Yeah.
That might happen. But like, yeah. But
You
also, if you
might
just
get,
donate to me because you want to see
yeah.
me make stuff, I'd be very happy. I'd be very happy to receive
Yeah.
donations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, we are at an end.
That's the end of
And
the presentation. Anything else that we didn't get to cover? Did we forget anything?
let me check my notes once. I'm pretty sure
Let's
we
see.
covered everything, but why not check my notes once?
Well, when you let me yap for like 2 hours and 30 minutes, we kind of get
Yeah.
around to things. Let's see. Do I have anything here in my notes?
Oh,
No.
yeah. We covered everything in my notes. Check yours once.
Yeah, I mean, all I have here is stuff about the New Astronauts video game, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to talk about that until there's actually a video game. So,
Fair enough. All right. So I hope everybody who is gonna watch this in the future likes it. I certainly do. And please give Nicola all of your spare money. Invest everything into him. I'm kidding.
Invest now.
Yeah, invest now. Yeah,
Don't delay. Invest today. This is not financial advice, by the way. This is not
yeah,
financial advice.
not financial advice. But if you do have interest in artistic commissions or you want to support Nicola, I would say it's a worthy cause. I would certainly, actually, I do think I'm gonna invest something, into your co-file. So
Thank you.
you get at least one cell in either way, you know, and
One
also,
sale. This is big numbers, ladies and gentlemen. We're just
yeah,
doing numbers.
yeah.
Oh,
So at least that's coming your way, and I do think commissions might be coming your way as well. I have some ideas about that. I'm not going to reveal it yet on stream, but we'll see. So, uh,
thank you.
yep. Uh, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.